All right, welcome everyone to the Sustainable Nexus Hybrid Conference. We're so thrilled to be live streaming today from Stockholm, right here at the Stockholm Business Region's office. I'm Jenny, and I'm honored to be co-host this event alongside with Christine, who is the project director of the Interreg project BSG Go, as we're part of that. So before we dive into the exciting day ahead, so let me just share a little bit about who we are at Stockholm Business Region. We are the economic development and also investment promotion and destination agency for the city of Stockholm. So our aim is to create and also support new and sustainable business opportunities for both the city and the broader region. As we know, Sweden has long been a proud leader in several industries, and with the gaming industry being one of them. So across all our initiatives, sustainability remains at the core of everything we do, especially in the digital sector, such as gaming. So today marks the second edition of the Sustainability Nexus conference, building upon the success of the first edition, which took place in Cologne and was hosted by our friends at Spielfabrique. So we have a fantastic lineup prepared for you, including inspiring presentations and engaging panel discussions in the morning. But in the afternoon, we'll host a series of interactive sessions and through satellite workshops held in Cologne with Spielfabrique and in Malmö with Game Habitat and in Berlin in Die Hive. Now, I will hand over to Christine and to dive a little bit deeper into why we're here today and just tell also a little bit about BSG project.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Yes, I'm Christine Sauter. I'm with the BGZ, a Berlin state-owned agency for international cooperation. We are usually coordinating and leading European projects within the realm of cultural industries or vocational education. In my case, I've been working on projects for the past 7 years that deal with the game industry, that I work with representatives from the game industry and with experts like Jenny. And we've been focusing with this last project, PSG Go, in particular on supporting the support ecosystem for startups and indies, meaning people like mentors or organizations like game hubs. Yeah? So within this endeavor, we also feel compelled to create a better understanding for those consultants, mentors or hubs, but also for decision makers within companies to understand how they could better contribute to shaping a sustainable game industry. We all know that there are beautiful and awesome initiatives all over the world, but mostly driven by American organizations, so on US time, which makes it a bit difficult for Europeans to join some of these events. This is why we thought of establishing the Sustainability Nexus on European time. It also is meant to be a framework and platform where European initiatives and projects can present themselves, can get more visibility, but other activities happening all over Europe should also, like the afternoon events, should also use the Sustainability Nexus to create more visibility and to have a kind of channel where people are interested to contribute themselves and to exchange and to understand better what's going on in Europe can actually hook up onto. So it's not only an annual conference on European time, it's meant to be a framework for a community of interest and practice in sustainable game industries. And with our satellite events this afternoon, we want to demonstrate how this could work. So we have 3 satellite events, as Jenny was presenting. 2 of them are hybrid, so people can join them online. There is on the menu, you will see there is an afternoon sessions button, and then you just hook on to them. But we tell you more about them later. And I hand back over to
Yeah.
Jenny for the house rules, housekeeping rules.
Actually, it's only one single rule. Have fun. That's the only house rule. But okay, just one house rule is about the chat function, basically, where you can see. Just use that to pose your question to the presenters, and if you have some comments to us as well. And we try to pick up along the way. Sometimes because of the time, frame, time management, we probably cannot reply to you right away, but we'll try to do that by the end of the day. So bear with us. So that's it, and we'll kick off the first keynote speaker, Patrick. Now, Patrick, making your way onto the stage, please. And you are our assistant professor at the Department of Game Design at Uppsala University. And last year, we had the pleasure of having you also as a keynote speaker, where you challenged us, and also the audience as well, with some very thought-provoking, alarming insights on the environmental aspects of accessibility. But this year, with the title, let's see. With the title, let's see in the background. Let's get the title here. Is the map to systematic sustainability. How to fight the dragon. How are we going to go with that? This sounds like you're taking us to another journey and really, basically to give us a more holistic view on sustainability. And it seems also you're taking another role, stepping into the modern days St. George. Is it? You know the story, yeah? Ready to tackle or even slay a dragon.
Yeah,
I present to the dragon about, how do you say, unsustainable practices. How about that? So show us how, please. Stage is yours.
Thank you so much.
Don't
this is amazing. Thank you, Jenny. Okay, woo. I'll try to live up to that. Thank you so much. Yes, cool. My name is Patrick. Yeah. Today, this talk is called The Map to Systemic Sustainability and How to Fight a Dragon. We will see if I can offer some solutions in that area, but yes, there's going to be some thought-provoking things here going on as well. I want to start right away with telling a little bit of a story. This is something that happened this summer on a sustainability game jam that we have been hosting together with other Nordic universities and bringing our students, in this case to Skövde, to make games around the topic of sustainability. And very early on, one of our students there told us about a game that they were making in their own studio that was sustainability themed and how they were really excited about that. And pretty soon, however, that story sobered and got a little bit more of a somber tone because they also talked about that they were aware, as was their team, that because of their game was funded by Meta, which is the company behind Facebook, they knew that their game, their studio, as well as a number of other ones, were part of a kind of greenwashing effort by Meta to make the argument in the European Union that we need less regulation for big tech companies, and really we are already addressing all of these issues with these games. So while we had there this student, that was really a bit of a heartbreaking moment for me and for our team of teachers that was excited about the game they were making, excited about the topic, but knew that because of the system in which they were working, they ended up being in some capacity co-opted by greenwashing efforts. So that is what I want to consider for this talk, the dragon, right? This possibility that even though we put our best foot forward, really put our efforts here at work, we still might end up not having the impact that we're looking for or even becoming part of the problem. And then, of course, how do we deal with that? And yes, you're absolutely right. There's going to be a little bit of a journey. You don't start right at the mountain of the dragon. You have to first assemble it. Let's see if we can get there all of this way, right? Exactly. But first, super quick about me. So my name is Patrick. These are me and my wife and our 6 kids in the south of France on a trip this summer. For some reason, deciding to take a caravan to the Mediterranean, which was kind of wild, but also beautiful. I have a PhD in media and communication studies. A long time ago, I wrote about co-creation in World of Warcraft. There's a TED Talk about that for those of you who are into that sort of stuff. Recently, I've been working a lot about sustainability in the games industry with, for example, a GDC talk or the opening talk to last year's event. A few things have happened since then. For example, I'm now associate professor. But more interestingly, we're working on a book. Meaning me together with Clayton Whittle and Trevor York, who are also the first authors of the Environmental Game Design Playbook from the Climate Special Interest Group of the International Game Developers Association, the Climate SIG. Sure, yeah, exactly. That's like a mouthful. It's a book that will have edited chapters with a variety of authors, some coming from academia, others from the games industry, small studios, big studios, different perspectives. And it's written for game makers. So it's meant to not necessarily just have big theoretical or philosophical debates, but practical, actionable advice on how to bring these perspectives while maintaining a view on the aim of systemic sustainability into your own work, into your everyday activities. All right, so let's take a closer look at what I mean with the dragon and the systemic perspectives here, right? Because how do we even approach that? One of the big perspectives on what I would consider meaningful impact for sustainability is that we need to make sure that our sustainable work in some capacity reaches this level of systemic change. So it's not something that is just like, okay, so how are we doing our thing here right now, but how do we produce society differently? It needs to be connected to material outcomes going beyond just the discursive. So it cannot just be how we talk about something. There needs to also be material impact. It needs to be collective, so not just us individual, but as a group. And here's number 4, and this is the one that features here now, of course, quite prominently. It needs to resist or at somehow subvert or get through greenwashing. All right, so where's the starting point, right? Where do we assemble our group here? Because right now this is still the dragon, it's a big perspective on things. We already have really nice perspectives here. This is, for example, Arnaud giving a GDC talk. He's amazing. He's one of the founding and most central members of the Climate SIG, and he has been putting in a lot of work doing exactly that, finding ways, tools, graphics, starting points for everybody, no matter where you are, what kind of game your studio is making, whether or not you are a designer, a graphic artist, somewhere working in the administration, where you can connect the story of your game to sustainability, where you can change your work and include sustainability perspectives tomorrow and even communicate to the rest of your studio how to do this. And he has been doing this work for a while, so there's a lot of really well documented and beautifully illustrated starting points here for you. Arnaud is a graphic designer and artist at Ubisoft. Yes, so his material even looks amazing. So he's writing one of our book chapters, and we're really excited to have him on board as this sort of really uplifting starting point. Because we don't really need to start from zero. There's a lot of things that we have already done that we need to also celebrate a little bit. For me, one of the reasons why I'm interested in this is that whenever I meet game makers, they are super excited about making an impact. Anybody that I have met that has to do with games and making games, they care so deeply about having a positive impact, about enriching the world, about making something positive and beautiful, to share that with other people, this human connection. And that is really there where I think that there's this huge potential of this sector of cultural creativity. We also made progress already in areas like representation, gender, neurodiversity, also nature. Many of these things are something that we have documented, better practices, and are improving every day. And we will hear more as the day goes on. We will hear from Maria about carbon tracking and standards. The Sustainability Research Project has concluded, and we can talk a little bit about the report from the Swedish games industry about sustainability efforts here. Mattis will be talking about economic sustainability from a bit of more of the studio level. I'm absolutely looking forward to that. He is also the one who has been coaching and mentoring me a little bit for the first talk last year, and taught me that I should really bring a little bit of an item with me on stage. I have one today as well, sort of for Mattis, so we will see how that turns out in a minute. And Emil will be talking about social sustainability, so I'm absolutely looking forward to that. Great, so we've come a little bit of the way. So now, in order to get to the mountain with the dragon, we need to make it through the dark forest of greenwashing, right? This is the place where, this is also the obvious reason why I picked this metaphor, this is the place where we need to keep our group, we need to keep our people on the path, pointing towards the mountain, going in the right direction. There might be some alluring voices to the side, something interesting going on here, and we need to make sure that we keep our eyes straight on this sort of systemic change that we need to go to, because there might be some spiders in the forest. So let's be careful with that. So what does that mean? When we take a look at existing efforts of dealing with sustainability, how can we make sure that we are aware of what that greenwashing in this area would look like, and how could we prevent this? As an example, the United Nations Sustainability Goals are a really useful and interesting tool, but they can be used as a greenwashing tool as well. For example, if we focus on just a handful of these goals and then sort of call our day's work done, that can be quite problematic. If you care about quality education, gender equality, and are creating a decent work environment, that doesn't mean that you don't need to care about life underwater or peace and justice and strong institutions. The same way, the other way around. If you care about life underwater and caring about your carbon emissions, you still need to make a work environment that isn't sexist or oppressive in other ways. So these are things that we need to all work for, all of them, and not just pick one or two out of that we can sort of focus on and then call our work done. If we take a look at this report that I mentioned already before from Dataspielsbranchen, we see that there are some parts of it that are really interesting and promising. For example, we see that there's an eco mode recommended as a default. There's notions of frugal design, where we as designers maybe think about how we can use as little resources as possible in the games that we make, and how we can make them playable on older hardware. My favorite sentence in that report is talking about decelerating the treadmill of continual hardware upgrades, which is really speaking to one of the big problems with the tech and gaming industry, that it's revolutionizing itself every new year with a new console cycle, a new tech cycle, and it's really dependent on that, and we need to step away from that and come to a more sustainable model. It recognizes that this requires international cooperation and public action in the form of support and legislation, right? That is systemic change with a material outcome. So these parts are great. But then it also goes a little bit off path. The funding that it got from Vinnova was for building policy, actionable policy in the games industry. And in its application text, it says that it wants to do that by proposing policy measures that are also included as a part of this project. So it aims to create these sort of policy steps as an outcome of the research project. And right now, it still falls short of that. Instead, at the end of the report, we get a little bit of a lukewarm, the creator's vision must be at the core, and like all art, it thrives best without instrumental or political control, which, yes, on some level, we all agree with. We would like to be able to make art with somebody looking out, without somebody looking over our shoulder telling us which topics we can take up or can't. But in this context, this is a little bit of a disappointment, because it indicates that a lot of the time spent in the report is talking about why the games industry doesn't really need policy, and it's already doing so well in comparison to others, and that is just not good enough. So here we need to be coming in and trying to point that out and keep our partners on this journey on the path towards sustainability. This doesn't mean that we need to be upset with the people that are working in these institutions. On the contrary, it's very important to be kind to people, but be ruthless to systems. The people working in these institutions, they're already doing the best they can. Maybe we can find ways to support them to be able to feel that they can have an even stronger voice in these reports. Maybe we can consider joining these organizations so that their constituency gives them a possibility to speak more clearly or with a stronger voice towards systemic change here, right? So oftentimes when we talk about the games industry, all the people that are making games feel like they are necessarily that they need to identify with that. And they can if that liberates or empowers them. But if we criticize the games industry, that doesn't necessarily need to mean that we're looking at you person, you over there, game maker, this is your fault. This can be a critique of a system in which we make culture without at all meaning to critique the people that are operating in it. We will hear a presentation from the Sustainable Games Alliance. So here, Maria will be talking about standardizations of carbon emission calculations. And these are really, really interesting as a starting point, and I think absolutely necessary. But if they remain just calculations and, compliance for companies, that is just staying greenwashing. We need to take the next step to these becoming policy implementations where there are requirements for how much you actually are allowed to emit, how much you're allowed to emit per played hour or something like that. There needs to be some next step to this that is going towards a material systemic goal. I am, of course, not the first one to propose these sort of perspectives here. For example, the drawdown aligned framework for the gaming industry, and it also has been made together with many of the people from the climate SIG, is pointing out that companies have historically approached policy advocacy in a piecemeal and opportunistic manner, but we need constant pressure on governments to create lasting change. And this is constant pressure to create smart, thought through, and effective policy, not constant pressure to stop the creation of policy, right? So that is the important step here. Also note to economic sustainability here, and Mattis will be talking about this a little bit more in a few seconds. I'm absolutely looking forward to that take. But when we look at the games industry right now, which is a little bit of a lull, if I'm going to want to be generous here, right? We can also see that the movements of the games industry aren't necessarily always oriented towards making the best games or even serving the people that are working in it. We can see movements like Fortnite becoming a breakout hit, but then not really becoming necessarily the best game it could be or putting Epic on the map as an amazing game creator, but instead it's positioning Epic as a competitor to Steam. It's used as a stepping stone to allow this company to try to make a play for becoming the next distribution platform for games. Similarly, Activision Blizzard and its sale to Microsoft is less about making the next great Blizzard or Activision or whatever game, but it's more about Microsoft strengthening its position in competition with other platforms by buying the place on the screen of these players here already and buying more players into their ecosystem and into their distribution platform. When we look at at least a large scale, big tech industry elements of the games industry, it makes sense to see them through a lens of platform capitalism, where really then, and that is a very, very sobering perspective, games and the media that we love, care about, and want to express ourselves in, and all of the people that I meet every day want to use to enrich the lives of each other, they aren't really what this structure cares about. It doesn't care about good games, good design, fun, or human connection. It cares about whether or not the platform that somebody owns is the last platform standing at the end in the competition between them, where everybody else has to now work and operate on that. So from that perspective, it is very, very tricky to think economic sustainability. It's meant to be economically sustainable for people with really, really big wallets, just not for you. So in this structure, how can we carve something out for people in smaller studios and in indie industries? I think that is something that I'm really, really interested in hearing. Okay, so now we are through the forest and we are approaching the mountain. And a map is very, very useful, but I think sometimes it's better to have it, physically. So I got Torrent's map here, of course, with us. So let's take a look. How can we really approach this mountain here? So yeah, this is my prop here. This is for you, Mattis. And so how do we get the best approach to this mountain, right? And here I would really like to draw on the submissions we get from our book and from our authors, because the points that they highlight is the biggest one is exactly that, building a community of mutual support, which is part of what we're doing here already, right? So it's finding other people that you can work with. It's building this sort of nexus around different people coming together, because we are working for a goal in an environment that can be unstable and where it's really, really important to have that other person that can show you where to get that next job or find you how to connect with somebody else. So we have both contributors that are writing from the perspective of somebody who has been working with being a small-scale investor themselves, that run investment organizations, that run game companies with social justice focus, and they point out how important community building is for them very, very early on. We have texts from somebody who has been writing about surviving in this industry, who pointed out that building structures of mutual support is the thing that made them being able to stay in the industry. So examples for these sort of small-scale funding agencies are, for example, I would like to point out Weird Ghosts, Astra, or Wings, if that interests you, which are small-scale investment organizations looking to invest and fund games with a particular focus on social justice. Then we've also got contributions that are talking about how we can use the possibility and the freedoms as game makers here to do whatever we can. And here I would like to quote Hugo from just now, 10 minutes ago, in our preparation room, talking about his work in implementing a really, really amazing system of talking about carbon emissions and energy use with the players in their game. And that is, well, just use the power use the power you be given and be as radical as you can. No, I got it wrong. I need to try that again. We need to file that. I need to polish that again, right? But do whatever you can with the power you are given, right? Now I got it. So that is exactly it. Think about the possibilities that we have and what we can do. We have a chapter that is looking at specifically making radical games that move the Overton window, which is the kind of communication sector in culture that we consider to be acceptable to talk about. And by making games that are standing outside of that, we can move that a little bit along so that more perspectives are something that we can entertain as, okay, maybe this is actually something we could see in the future and discuss. We have been seeing articles and book chapters about games that support activist movement on the ground, either by being developed alongside civic action or by changing how this sort of civic action and activism are getting portrayed or shown, or even educating about it. And we have seen work about games that change the cultural imaginary so that we can imagine a different tomorrow. A game that we have been making, me with my colleagues, this is the Art of Self-Defense. It's a game that investigates the connection between extreme wealth and the obstruction of effective climate change. It's an art game where players get together to make an activist poster that looks at how one of the biggest or most richest billionaires on the planet is currently standing in the way of us collectively dealing effectively with climate change. right? So this is something that we have made. Then we have Tonight We Riot as a game that is absolutely pushing the Overton window, that portrays worker uprising in the kind of metal slug action game where you shoot it out with the capitalist overlords to take them down, right? So changing the ways we can normally actively think about this. We have a game like Block by Block, which is a game about actually understanding strategies to taking over city blocks. And we have games like Fake It to Make It and Influence Inc., which are games about making fake news and understanding how that is functioning, or games about how PR agencies can destabilize governments, which is an interesting way to explore. Or another perspective on being radical, Terra Nil, here, where the radical take that is really going all in for and representing so beautifully is decentering humans and the human experience and human exploitation of nature to instead present nature as something beautiful all by itself without the need of generating any kinds of resources. Right, so now we're really close to that dragon. And I think one of the most important things to keep in mind here for this notion of resisting greenwashing, right? Going back to the story that I told in the beginning of the game studio that felt, and the game designer that felt that there's a problem, that they made this amazing sustainability game, but they were part of the big funding strategy of a big publisher, is to ask yourselves, what is really the best that these organizations can do as well? Right? If we look at a powerful organization and they're doing something already, and that might make sense, then we can ask, but what is the best you can do? The proposal that Meta, as one of the most powerful corporations on the planet, would go along to try to approach sustainability by funding small game studios is in the end laughable. It's great if they want to fund sustainability studios. That's awesome, but they could be able to do so much more. They could make that systemic policy change happen just by themselves. So making sure that our games and our voice matter, that we don't become greenwashing in the end as well, will have to mean holding the most powerful accountable. It means also looking at the system in which we operate and the system in which we produce this sort of culture, right? So how could this become greenwashing? And what are you doing about stopping it? Not as a question to necessarily only ask yourself, but also ask the powerful, or ask us here when we are discussing in a panel. This is the question that I would give to the audience to take with you as a tool for your own critical analysis here in the future. So I think this is how you, in the end, fight a dragon. You build a community with people that support each other and care about the same efforts, find meaningful starting points already early on where you can make a change in your work, in your studio, tomorrow, make sure that we stay on the path together towards that systemic aim and don't get tracked off the path in the dark forest of greenwashing. See what powers we actually have in capacity building to impact the people that we are working with, or what else we can do actually with the powers that we have, and then together try to see how far we can get. That is my take for how to fight the dragon. As for resources, we still have the excellent environmental game design playbook. I also really like the drawdown report. And our own book, which is right now still in the form of an insane manuscript, will come out, hopefully, if everything goes well, in GDC 2026. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. I think we all would love to immediately jump in and discuss things with you, but we have this wonderful panel later on, so we keep that for then. And we will ask now Maria, as you already announced her, to join us. Maria Wagner, I hope that she'll be joined. Thank you.
Cool.
Yes, so Maria Wagner is the co-founder of the SGA, the Sustainable Game Alliance, and founder of Impact with Joy. She will introduce us to the current work of this incredible initiative, SGA, which offers guidance for companies and for them to know how to meet the upcoming legal and business requirements for being sustainable, and to not only as a company but as an industry as a whole. Now, let's hope that she is already online.
Can you see my slides and see me, or?
Hold on, Maria. Yes, now we see your slides.
Perfect.
The stage is yours, Maria.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting us and in general organizing this great Nexus, because I think it's very important to get together and to discuss best practices and also values, like our values when it comes to the games industry, and sustainability in general, because I really believe we can pass the greenwashing forest, as was said before, only if we know what our values are and what we want in the end. So, as Christina said, I today will present the Sustainable Games Alliance. Wait, let me see. Oh, okay. Let me see if the slides works. Okay. So our goal is to decarbonize the games industry. And we are a non-profit cooperative. And it was very important to us to be a cooperative. So every member which joins the Sustainable Games Alliance is like a crucial part of the cooperative. They have voting rights, and they basically also decide what we do. It's very important because we are developing a global standard for the industry, how to basically measure their emissions, but also how to deal with social and governance topics. I will talk about the standard a little bit later on more, but in general, the idea is to help games companies with the upcoming sustainability regulations from the European Union. And so the standard sits on top of these regulations and makes it easier for studios to report and to have like comparable numbers. And in the end, with the comparable numbers which we get out of the standard and methodology, we then will have actionable ways of decarbonizing. So yeah, but as said, I will say more about it later on. What else is important? We are an organization which is transparent, and we produce, like, everything what we produce is basically available to the public, because we believe it's very important that everything is available to small studios and the big studios. Otherwise, it won't be used. And otherwise, it will be really, really hard for us to work together and to achieve the sustainable transition within the industry, which is needed, basically. Yeah. A couple of words about our team and yeah, basically how we got together, who is backing us. So we are an organization which is backed by industry veterans. So we have, for example, a David Helgason, founder of Unity, backing us, or Petri Järvileto, co-founder of Remedy. But we are not only there for the industry and from the industry, we are also working with scientists and people from outside the industry, so it doesn't become just like a greenwashing exercise. So we have people on the advisory board looking at the work we are doing. We have Dr. Ben Abraham on our team, who's been researching basically climate change in games since more than 12 years and has been working with companies reducing their footprint. And this is like very important when we talk about transparency and global standards making. We need to make sure that we not only represent the interests of the industry, but that we also see ourselves as part of a whole society to make, to enable a sustainable future. So yeah, that's why we choose to have this structure. Yeah, I think I already touched upon that. So we work open and transparent. So the standard which we are producing is available to everyone, because only then everyone can use it, and only then we will have comparable numbers and will be able to do benchmarking. At the moment, this is not possible because basically right now everyone is reporting whatever they want. Of course, it's based on the greenhouse gas protocol, but the greenhouse gas protocol, for example, or the ESRS, this is like the standard which the new regulations from the European Union use. They're very vague. So they leave a lot of room to wiggle, and that's why we still don't have like comparable numbers. Yeah, these are the regulations which will definitely hit the industry. So we have the, it's like an alphabet soup basically. So we have the Green Claims Directive, we have the CSDDD, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and as said before, the ESRS, the reporting standard. So this is something what companies will need to face, and the big companies are already facing it. So for example, if we talk about CD Projekt Red or like companies that size, they have to report on this year's numbers, and basically down the line, also like small studios will have to report. And of course, like for a big studio, it's easier to have the resources to do this properly, but for small studios, it will be really, really hard. And that's why we want to create the standard to make it easy for every studio to make this transition happen, to, on the one hand, be compliant with the law, but also to decarbonize. Because especially like the CSRD, it not only forces you to give some numbers, it also forces you to say, how will you transition? How do you want to be better? And of course, this is way easier if we work on these topics together, because already now we have companies which disclose more than others and then look less good publicly if they disclose more. But in the end, who will be way further in the future because they see what their problems are. And if we all together decide on a standard, what we want to disclose, and maybe also talk about some boundaries, it will be way easier to do the transition all together. Yeah, here you see a short timeline, how all the different laws will be implemented. So we have the CSRD, which is, as said, already implemented, and large companies have to report in 2025 on this year's numbers. The CSDDD will affect only really big companies and will come later. It will also look into human rights issues. And we have the Green Claims Directive, which is at the moment implemented into national laws and will be active in 2025 or later. It depends on the different countries. But here again, when we look at the Green Claims Directive, it will be important that we as an industry have developed a common language, because saying that you're carbon neutral won't be legal anymore if you don't have like a third party really vouching for it. And just buying carbon credits won't be enough, for example. And also, if you do like green game jams, you have to specifically say what makes this jams really green. Like, it's not enough just to use these words. You really need to back it up with numbers and methodologies. So yeah, just for you guys to know. And maybe for everyone who's not familiar with the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, so it not only touches upon the environment part of sustainability, it also concerns the social and governance part of sustainability. Yeah. So many times, if we talk about the games industry, a lot of people say, yeah, it's digital, so we don't have such a huge impact. And here they're wrong, because so like we have an estimate that at the moment, the global games industry has a footprint of 50 to 100 million tons of CO2, which is basically, close to the footprint of like a country like Sweden or Norway. And this is something what we many times forget if we talk about in games activations, and if we talk about how can the games industry be more sustainable, we really need to decarbonize the industry. It's not enough just to do some side activations. We really need to look into our value chain, how to make it better. Here you see like a quick overview of what I talked about before, that at the moment, basically, the companies can say whatever they want, especially when it comes to scope 3 categories. Some companies are disclosing it, others are not. And that's what we want to change with the standard. On the one hand, it will be required anyway by the CSRD. But what we want to do is to really talk and develop with the industry a way how to report. So we create a leveled market field that companies which do more don't look worse, but that we have comparable numbers and can use it to decarbonize the industry. Yeah, like more about the standard, as said, like it's on top of the greenhouse gas protocol in the ESRS. It makes it easier for companies to report according to the upcoming regulations. It basically makes the blurry fields where companies would not know what does it mean for me as a game studio. We help them to define exactly these topics, and we do it like together with the industry. So we talk with different companies, use their best practices and suggestions, then run it with scientists, and with that, like we build then the standard, which will be publicly available. And it is a moving target, so it's not just like a calculator. It is, the standard will be developed. We keep developing all the time because it is related to the regulations, but it is also related to the current state of like climate change. Emission factors change, regulations change, and that's why we need to adapt. So everyone who thinks like it's enough to have just like a calculator, it is wrong. We really need to work together. A calculator is great to understand a little bit where your problems are. But if we talk about system change and really decarbonizing the industry, it is more complex, and it is something which we need to look at not only like one time and then it's solved. We really need global common action to work on it and solve this problem. Yeah. Oh yeah, and of course, like the standard reduces the amount of efforts an individual studio has to put into, because if we work together, it will be cheaper for everyone and easier. Yeah. So let me check how much time I have. I think I still have 2 minutes. So here you see a couple of services which we offer. So basically, we offer valid data, benchmarking. We help companies with reporting. But especially what we offer is we offer a community where you can talk to people who have the same problems when it comes to reporting and who want to achieve the same, basically decarbonization. Here are a couple of samples of our work. So we developed the standard step by step. Where we are at the moment can be seen on our website. We have a couple of webinars which you can check out on our YouTube channel. We shoot interviews with industry experts which talk about their problems and so on, and solutions as well. And for members, we basically help them hands-on with decarbonization and the reporting, and organize meetups for them to exchange their knowledge and best practices. And as said, like, this is something which we will need to work on together. So that's why I'm really, really happy that we have this conference and address these topics. I think what is still missing is like really knowledge exchange and continuous work on this topic. And that's what we would like to offer in the future as an organization which constantly works on this topic. So yeah, feel free to join us and also our conversations on the Discord channel. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Maria. That was really very inspiring again. There are some comments, some statements from Ben in particular in the chat. You know, we have this forum, it's called forum, yeah. Just in the chat, please respond to that. We're going to try and respond and have you all help us respond to those during the afternoon while the other sessions are taking place. But I say thank you, Maria, and we move on to our next speakers, really. So it's over to Game Habitat, the cluster organization for the game industry in southern Sweden. And they have worked on the project Sustainability together with the National Trade Organization for Game Developers in Sweden, Dataspelbranschen, which we all know, and RISE. We have somebody from RISE here later on the panel. So the Research Institute of Sweden, and together with the Sustainability Agency, you and we, they developed the Sustainability report, which has been released just a few weeks ago. And on station, live at Game Habitat, we will have Anna Larsen and Amanda Möttönen from You and We. They're ready to present. You and We. They developed the Sustainability report, which has been released just a few weeks ago. Okay, we have a sort of station live. Okay, and I will hand over the floor to Anna and Amanda because they will present us the new carbon calculation toolbox for game developers they have developed. Thank you. Are you there?
Welcome everyone here to Game Habitat, where we are going to present some interesting results from the recent report. First, I want to say, welcome to Game Habitat and give you a short introduction to who we are and why we're part of this Sustainability Nexus event. Now I'm waiting for my clicker to work. There we go, introduction to Game Habitat. So this is the south of Sweden. This is the area we are covering, where we have 150 game companies, 1,700 game developers, 15 game educations, 650 game students. These numbers are probably a bit higher when the official report comes out next week, I believe, for the Swedish games industry, which is very exciting. But this is the area we're covering. And what is our mission? What are we doing here? Well, our mission is to create, nurture, and grow a thriving, supportive, and inclusive ecosystem for game development in southern Sweden, with some different areas. And a part of this is, of course, also to have a focus on sustainability from different angles. Both economic sustainability, and also environmental sustainability. So. And we're coming to you here from DevHub, which is our house, which is a big house in the middle of the city of Malmö, where we have game developers sitting throughout the floors, renting offices here and making for a nice community. With that, let's move on to what we're talking about today, the Sustainability project. Sustainability in new digital industries. It's a collaboration between the Swedish games industry, Dataspelbranschen, RISE, the Research Institutes of Sweden, the Game Habitat, that's us, and You and We, which is a sustainability agency with funding from Vinnova, which is the Swedish Innovation Fund. And we actually released a report just a few weeks ago. And if you want to get that report, I put a QR code here so you can all, take photos of the screen with your phones, which is a great activity. Today here we have two speakers from You and We, and they have been creating a climate calculated toolbox. that as part of the project, and they are here today to show you how it works and how to get started with it. And if you want to dig a bit deeper, there's of course a breakout session later today where we'll go through the toolbox, or they will be going through the toolbox in details, and you can get help on how to actually use it yourself. So if you want to go in a bit deeper, look for this breakout session in the afternoon. And with that, I think it's time to move on to our two speakers, Anna and Amanda. So welcome to the stage. Take it away.
Thank you, Jesper.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be part of this hybrid conference, Sustainability Nexus. My name is Anna Larsson Corcoran. I'm a sustainability consultant and partner at We, a sustainability consultancy that have worked with sustainable development for about 30 years, actually. And today we're here to talk about Play, Create, Calculate, a toolbox that we have developed to help small and medium-sized companies to understand their climate impact. But before we go into climate change from a games perspective and this toolbox, I would just like to say that I totally agree with what Patrick Prax has said about sustainability at the systemic level, and we also very much appreciate the presentation by Maria from the Sustainable Games Alliance, because of course, to solve the challenges of climate change and sustainability, we really need to have this broad perspective and collaboration between actors in the industry. However, in our project, we have focused on the aspect of climate change as part of this Sustainability project, which has the aim to kind of strengthen sustainability broadly in the game development sector. So, for the past year, my colleague Amanda Muttonen and I have worked on developing a climate calculator and a guidance document to make it easier for small and medium-sized game studios to measure their greenhouse gas emissions. Just like Maria said, this is quite complex and it can be time-consuming. So that's what we are trying to contribute with, helping the smaller companies that don't have that much resources to do this in an easy way. And we call this the Play, Create, Calculate toolbox. And this toolbox, it contains a climate calculator and a guidance document, and it all builds on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is an international standard for doing greenhouse gas calculations at the corporate level. And this is quite a technical and complex standard. So what we have done is that we have interpreted this standard, which are a few hundred pages, in the context of game development. So, for example, we have identified which categories that are applicable for a game studio, and we have also prioritized them so that you can spend your resources on the right things. So high priority, medium priority, low priority, and we have also pointed out those categories that are probably not at all relevant for a game studio to focus on. We have also worked with 3 different ambition levels. To calculate your greenhouse gas emissions can be quite time-consuming, and we want you to be able to do this even if you are not a climate expert. So we provide these 3 ambition levels where you can start as a beginner to just kind of understand what this means. You can use some more kind of generic data just to start the process, and then work your way through an intermediate, and then hopefully becoming an expert at these kind of, or to understanding your climate impact. And of course, not just focusing on the data that is collected, but also on the actions to reduce emissions. A very relevant question to ask, and I think a lot has been said about this already, but a relevant question to ask is why game studios should track and reduce their climate impact. Well, first of all, climate change is an urgent global challenge, and I think we all, small companies and big companies, have a responsibility to do what we can to contribute to achieving the Paris Agreement's ambition of limiting global warming to 1.5 degree. So I think that's quite that's quite clear. That's one of the reasons. But yes, like has been mentioned previously, there is new EU legislation, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, making it mandatory for some larger companies to report their greenhouse gas emissions, and not only to report them, but also to have a transition plan in place to show how emissions are going to be reduced. But there can also be expectations from stakeholders, from employees, from potential investors, or even from players. But I think the most important reason actually to track, to start tracking your emissions is to know what is big and what is small, so that you can actually focus your efforts on the right things, so that you can take informed decisions. And like was mentioned by Patrick Prax, to ensure that you are not greenwashing, that you're focusing on what it actually, where it actually matters. Before I hand over to Amanda, who are going to go through more the details of the climate calculator that we have developed, let's have a look at the value chain of game development. So to develop and produce a game, there are resources required both upstream and upstream in the value chain. There is energy needed to run servers, to heat the office, to run computers. There's also hardware purchases needed for development of games and for the testing of games. But there are also other kind of purchases needed, such as catering, furniture, data centers, cloud services. And then we have some other things that are not at all unique for a game studio, but employees need to travel to the office, and there are also business travel related to both the development of games, but maybe also marketing of games. And this part of the value chain of game development doesn't differ much from any kind of service-based organizations. And we estimate that maybe 10 to 30% of emissions occur in this part of the value chain. But it's interesting when you look downstream. So those are the resources that are required when the games are played. And here, up to 90% of the climate impact of a studio, if you measure everything, occurs. So this is really where efforts should be focused, but this is also the part where it's most difficult maybe to actually change things. But the main impact occurs here, and that is from the playing of the games. So the energy that is required for the devices that the games are played on, and of course the emissions depend on the energy mix in the countries. If you play a game in a country that has a poor energy mix with a lot of fossil fuels, the impact will be higher compared to if you're playing a game in a country where there is a large share of renewable energy. So that were a few words about the value chain of game development, and I'm handing over to Amanda, who will go into the details about the climate calculator.
Yes, thank you, Anna. So I will talk a little bit more in detail about the calculator, how to use it and how it works. I will also shortly show what it looks like when data is entered, and briefly mention some different reduction initiatives. So in the calculator that is Excel-based, there are tabs in different colors. We have assessed with input from interviews, industry reports, what areas are relevant and most material for game developers. And these are color-coded. So the red tabs are high priority, yellow is medium priority, and the green tabs are either irrelevant or low priority. And Anna was talking earlier about the greenhouse gas protocol, and they divide the different types of emissions into 3 scopes. Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. So in Scope 1, we have for game studios company cars, the fuel used for company cars. In Scope 2, we have purchased electricity and heating. And in Scope 3, we have 15 different emission categories. And this is where we have done a prioritization and chosen what categories are most relevant. So the high priority categories are Scope 1 and Scope 2. So company cars, electricity and heating. And these are also pretty much mandatory for every company that does a carbon assessment. From scope 3, we have purchase goods and services, business travel, and use of sold product as the red high priority categories. And if you are a game studio and you're calculating your emissions for the first time, we recommend you to focus on the activities in the red tabs in the calculator. And in general, only green fields can be filled in with data or comments. It's not possible to add data or edit the calculator elsewhere. And of course, in the calculator, you also find other guidance documents. So let's look at an example of how the calculator works and how to enter data using the category purchase goods and services. And this category refers to all purchases during the reporting period. It's a category that is material for most companies, independent of sector. However, the types of purchases vary. So we have included a selection of purchase goods and services deemed to be relevant and material for game studios. So you choose an activity in the Choose Alternative tab. Then you add your data. And you can choose, for example, different types of data. So you can enter both activity data, the quantity, such as how many units smartphones have you purchased. It's also possible to enter spend data if quantity is not available. Then you enter the spend in Swedish krona for the purchase category. For some purchases, you may have a total emission supplied by your supplier. This may be the case for data centers, for example. And then it's possible to add a total calculated emission into the calculator. And then the calculator automatically calculates the emissions. We recommend to write comments, for example, where the data was found, if it was a contact person at a supplier who gave it to you. And this is to keep it for historical reasons, as you will do your assessment on an annual basis. It might be a different person the next year. Yes. So many of the activities that are relevant for game developers are common with other companies and service sectors. There are some purchases, there's travel, employee commuting, and so forth. But unique for this sector and game developers is the use of sold product. So regardless if computer games are defined as a license or a product, the emissions that arise from playing of games should be included in the assessment. And the greenhouse gas emissions from playing of games is quite complex to assess at a detailed levels because there are many unknown variables, such as the lifetime of the game, the player's electricity mix, what exact device the player is using, and also emissions related to transferring of data. So in the calculator, we offer a simplified calculation of the emissions from gameplay. And to do this, you need to obtain the following data from your distribution platform. And that is the number of hours played per device and region and country. And in the calculator, you then add this. You can also add it per game. If the location is unknown, there's an option for that too. If you know what computer specifications in terms of power that your game requires to ensure a good player experience, you can select either high spec, medium spec, or low spec. There's of course an option for average as well. And we know that a low spec game may be played on a medium or high spec computer, but this feature is added to the calculator to capture efforts made by game developers to keep the energy consumption low when the game is played. So it's important to keep two things in mind when doing this. A very successful game, played thousands or millions of hours, will have a much higher total impact than a game that is not appreciated by the players. So it's not always helpful to just look at the total emissions. It's also possible to track progress, for example, with a key performance indicator, such as emissions per played hour or similar. And this is something to think about if you're comparing yourself to other companies or other game studios, that the success of your game will highly influence your emissions as well. Good. So this is how the results are presented. You will see it per scope, 1, 2, and 3, the total emissions per scope 3 category as well. And you will also see a percentage of the total. And this is to help guide you where to focus your initiatives as well, so that you see what parts are big and small. So to end this session, let's dig a little bit deeper and mention some activities that you can take already today for the high priority areas to reduce your emissions. And I'm sure that some of these are already implemented at your organization. For scope 1 and 2, most likely not a big part of your total emissions, but these are mandatory to report on and follow up on. So it's about phasing out fossil fuels in your company cars, making sure that you have renewable electricity in your premises, and working with energy efficiency measures. When it comes to purchase goods and services, of course, it depends on what type of purchases you have, but try to extend the life length of hardware, purchase reconditioned furniture or hardware, etc., where it's possible. Maybe it's not possible for all your hardware, but maybe for your screens and so forth. Also collaborate and choose suppliers that have a sustainability profile so that the money you spend is also going to companies that are actually trying to make a difference. For business travel, you can set up a travel policy to decrease unnecessary trips. Also work to promote these kind of hybrid conferences, such as today, that also minimize traveling. And in general, encourage low-emission transport options. And use of sold products, where you have your emissions most likely, but it may be also very challenging to affect. But work with optimizing games and ensuring that the games have a long lifespan and can be played on old consoles and computers. And of course, industry collaboration on an international level. So, how to get started? Of course, we encourage you to join our afternoon session today, as we will then get you started and help you plan your next climate assessment. But you need to have a working group internally. Most of the small and medium-sized companies do not have a sustainability manager. So you have to involve someone from human resources, procurement, and so forth, and also decide on ambition level. Perhaps the first year it's good enough to be on the beginner level. Also, you begin to collect data, of course. What people do you have to talk to? What suppliers do you have to reach out to, and so forth? And then use the calculator, see what your emissions are, and then analyze the results and implement actions to reduce the emissions. And this guidance and calculator is available online, free for everyone to use and access already today. So we encourage you to download these documents and get started and meet up with us this afternoon, where you will have 2 experts that will help you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Game Habitat Mama. So far we have listened to the policy level and compliance with policy and regulation and standardizations available, and also down to very, very, very hands-on toolboxes, how to measure and follow up the carbon footprint. Now, we have to pick up another topic, which on the social side of sustainability, which is but probably is more challenging. So, introduce Elmi.
Yes, hello, sorry.
Hear your voice now. Yes,
Yeah.
on the stage here in Stockholm. So, Emmy, you are a postdoc researcher at the Royal Danish Academy with a PhD in, now it's a number of things coming, digital media, culture industries, policy making, and game analysis. So it's a very impressive, I would say, range of fields that making your work truly very interdisciplinary. So today, you promised to really guide us through the crucial topic of DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion in gaming. So it's a key factor that influence who creates games and how games are designed and who plays them. So we are really excited to learn from you. So Gamey, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Speaking of social sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm also at home here in my own apartment taking care of my daughter who's sick. So it's good to have or be at a workplace where you're allowed to take care of your family as such. But what I wanted to present today is basically just suggesting or pointing towards kind of best practices for gender inclusivity and also retention in terms of keeping your workers happy and satisfied at your workplace as such. I'll go through like some of the parts and stuff so you can see what I mean with everything. But basically, even though, you know, when we talk about diversity and identity and these social categories, I think it's important to think that even though I focus a lot on gender, and especially we talk about binary understandings in terms of women and men, it's good to also think more broadly. Of course, I'm sure many of you who are listening are already well aware. It's not just about being a woman, but it's also about other social categories such as you know, race, class, nationality, ethnicity, sexuality, ability, and these sorts of issues. So when you listen to my presentation, you can almost switch the word gender with these other terms as such. I've included in this graph data from Video Games Europe, or what was formerly known as ISFE, where they show in Europe that the women demographic in the game industry is 23.7%. And then with a small parenthesis that it has increased from 22%. So I think it's important here to understand that in the terms of the games industry and gender and diversity, is that it has always been a thing, right? It's not just something that's come up in recent years. It's always been a major component to what games are as a cultural like entertainment form, but also in terms of its production and enjoyment across the world. So what you can take this presentation as is also maybe thinking about as an organization or as a company or an institution, how you can kind of like ensure you're compliant and you also acknowledge some of the contemporary social issues when it comes to, for example, like pay gap, you know, the career ceiling for women or other identity categories, and also, of course, access and recruitment, and then also, I guess, more politically in terms of the societal development, where you see a lot of reactionary and right-wing kind of fallbacks to in terms of oppression and other things, right? Where companies can also make a difference internally. And yeah, like I said, it has been a thing for a long time, and I think in my own experience, it has been taken very seriously. Speaking back to Patrick's talk earlier, there are a lot of companies and people who want to do better, who really strive and try to make things better in terms of, yeah, let's say, for example, gender inclusion. And I think as part of the presentation, I won't go into this, but you can also think more clearly based on data and existing research that I'll point towards in a second about like the preconceived notions about who is making games, who is playing them, and who is in them across these three different categories. But that's not something we have time for today. As part of the project or the research that we've been doing, we've been part of another one called the Fair Game. It's an Erasmus Plus project where we work with partners in Spain and Italy, but where we focus on, so the quote is fostering gender balance and collaborative leadership through upskilling and empowerment of women in game careers. Basically, like trying to say or broaden the type of people who would like to join or participate in the making of games, not just in terms of who joins them immediately or wants to enter the game industry, but also more long-term in terms of retention and longevity of one's career when making games. We have a website. I don't have a fancy QR code, but it's called fairgameproject.eu if anyone wants to check it out. And within the project, we have made this white paper. It's supposedly easily readable document that goes through some various things, such as the players who plays games, like how does the gender makeup or demographic look there in terms of the existing research, but also the games, who is represented in them, how do they represent gender, and of course, perhaps more relevant here is the producers, like what's going on in terms of the game companies. And what I'll focus on today in terms of also time, I'll see how long I have, but basically coming with like very direct suggestions for actions you can take based on the Women in Games report. So that's called Building a Fair Playing Field. You can access this online if you want to, and here we kind of boil it down to some of the key parts of this report that's important. So for example, if you're in an organization and you want to recruit, You should probably, when you want to hire people or get new people on board, you want to be open towards other fields and target people who might not even work in games. That's also been part of our Fair Game project. You can also always demonstrate the company values in terms of inclusivity and diversity. And then when making job postings, you can kind of write them in a way that they appeal to women. There's this good website that's also listed in the report that kind of like goes through some gender bias stuff. Sorry, my daughter's coming in now. And then you can also be transparent about salary levels. And then you can also advertise and target your job postings across networks or membership societies that represent marginalized groups, so not just to your usual people, right? In terms of interviews and so on, there's like many specific things you can do, but you can prepare and decide on what question you want to ask in advance, and feel free to tell the candidate. You can include more than one women candidate at an interview. And then using a structured interview format with predefined questions also help kind of like formalize the process to be more attentive towards other people or treat people equally to avoid biases in the interview process. And then if you have any kind of task-based assessments of the hiring process, you can also allocate enough time to do these type of assessments. And finally, during the interview process, you can also encourage questions about pay and for family-oriented policies and diversity initiatives, so that you also tell the hiree or whoever you want to interview that you are clear and focused about these things, right? And then there's just the big topic of quotas that people usually talk about, but not that it's necessarily bad or inherently bad, but sometimes, at least in terms of the studies been done, if you publicly enforce and signal that you're doing quotas, it might actually scare away certain types of people or the people you want to target, but simply because they think that they are getting hired for who they are and not as what they're able to do, right? Yeah, in terms of working conditions, it's also important to perhaps include and consult unions to ensure that you have a proper and healthy working conditions. Crunch is obviously a thing that's been in the industry for a long time, but this especially impacts women workers. And then you can also think more clearly about like having a pro-health stance. Sorry. Yeah, det er okay, Scan. Show to your workers that you have diversity initiatives and efforts, and that the organization is taking to reach pay equality. And then you can demonstrate your commitment to changing gender norms. Commit, and yeah, so anyway, sorry, my daughter is interrupting me. But anyway, so also in terms of your product and design, you can also build cultural awareness already early in the design process, so that you not just do it like too late. And then adopt a culturally aware approach to character and world design. And like I said, all at an early stage level. And you can, of course, also reach out to external groups and organizations that can provide expertise if need be. I know, for example, over in Sweden and in the Game Habitat, they have good connections with regard to that as well. Yeah, I'm kind of over time already, but there's like different things you can go through the report that we have, but also the Women in Games report that I'm not going to talk too much about here. But it's important to kind of make sure that you also retain people and you have zero tolerance, and you avoid this thing called minority taxation, where you confer extra labor on marginalized groups such as women to do the diversity work as such, right? Yeah, so if you want to read more, we also have something about community management and about educational institutions. If you're an organization or university or school, about like what can you do to have more social sustainability as such. And if you want to read more, you can find it at fairgameproject.eu. So thank you.
Catch you ahead of time. So thank you for
Oh,
giving
okay.
us more time. Thank you. Thanks so much.
No, that's good, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and let's get on with our program. As we all know that the gaming industry is currently facing economic challenges, like many other verticals and sectors as well. And how well both individuals, creators, and industry, they can handle both the social and environmental challenges. Depends a lot on the sense of their security and control. So this is a topic that matters from Spielfabrique will elaborate on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Hello, Stockholm.
Hello, Cologne, hi.
Eurovision, so I'm doing the Eurovision thing, and
Oh,
thanking you
yes.
for hosting
I love
such
this set. Matthias, you promised to share your thoughts on the topic I just introduced. Maybe you heard. and also introduced the new initiative we have from Spielfabrique, a design really to help indie studios become more financially resilient and think ahead, also to drive innovation in the industry. Does that sound familiar?
That does sound like what I have planned for you.
Oh,
Fantastic.
yes, that's fantastic. We all align. So I think the stage is all yours. Take it away, Matthew.
Yes. So the other day, I was, as I do so often, I was sailing on open sea on the ocean, which is a weird way to start a talk about sustainability, especially economic sustainability. But it's also weird because I actually live in the middle of the mountains. And the ship that I'm talking about is a 3-mast galley, all wood, no engine. So the more perceptive of you will have now guessed that I am actually talking about a virtual sea, and I'm talking about the Sea of Thieves. Now, Sea of Thieves is a pirate game. And that means that as a pirate, you go out to sail, you follow treasure maps, you dig out treasure, and then you go hand in that treasure hoping that nothing bad happens. Or because it is a pirate game, you can also sail out to sea, find other unsuspecting pirates to steal their hard-earned treasure, and then hope nothing bad happens as you go hand in your loot. So the game allows you to play either of those two ways. And me and my crew will say we're more of the peaceful sort. We like to dress up ourselves, we like to dress up our ship, we like to dress up our pets, and then we go out and just have a jolly good time. We dig for treasure, but also we just like fool around on the Sea of Thieves. And here's an example of how that usually turns out for us. The other day, we were again sailing out on the Sea of Thieves, doing the piratey thing. We were actually loaded with treasure because we had just finished a very lucrative quest. And then inevitably, we had a crew sensing our wealth and sailing right towards us to lighten our load against our will. Oh, so they thought. Because over the years, we have established a fantastic strategy to deal with these sort of people, which we call the Great Escape. Trademark. The thing you have to know about us as pirates in Sea of Thieves is that we are not really peaceful by choice. We are just really shit at combat. So we don't have a choice in that. But what we are really good at is patience and finding ever more sophisticated ways of sneaking our loot away from the players who wish to steal it from us. So when this crew showed up, they had no idea that they were in for an hour-long chase with us that led them to absolutely nowhere. We sailed up and down the map, much to the dismay of our chasers, until they finally caught up with us. But oh, what's that? There was no more loot on board. Because half an hour earlier, when they were chasing our ship, one of our crew members was busy loading all of our treasure onto a little rowboat, detached that rowboat, rowed away with that rowboat to hand in all our loot. We collected all the money while the other crew was kind of, chasing us. And that's a win. For us, that's a win because we did it in style as well. Like we got our loot, we got our money, but we did it in style. And this way of playing games and of working inside the system of Sea of Thieves reminded me of how what we see currently working in the games industry, working in very economic systems that are kind of betting against you. And the three things I want to focus on are anticipation, resilience, and innovation. But first, quick word about us. If you haven't heard about us, we're Spielfabrique. We are what we're calling an ecosystem catalyst. We work in all things indie, and we do two types of work primarily. One is we're empowering indies directly by working directly with them. And the other thing we're doing is we're building support for indies. So this is a collection of the programs that we're doing. You don't need to read all of them. Just know that there's a bunch of accelerators in there. There's matchmaking programs in there. There's some financing programs in there. And there's, of course, also our sustainability programs in there. The Sustainability Nexus, which you're seeing on the top, on the bottom right, and Strategies, which is our research project on sustainability in games. So back to anticipation, resilience, and innovation. And we'll start with anticipation. 33 and 200. These are the numbers that I would like you all to remember after this part. In 2018, a study conducted by economists from Denmark and Germany revealed that companies that were really great at anticipating future events, that those companies were 33% more profitable than companies who weren't, and they exhibited a 200% higher growth compared to companies who weren't good at anticipation. They call this ability to anticipate in that report future preparedness. And what does that exactly mean? Today we call it also futures literacy. It's kind of, it falls into the same ballpark, and it's the ability to understand why and how we can use the future to prepare and plan and interact with the complexity, in this case, of the ecosystem, of our games ecosystem. And the best indie studios that we know are also really good at doing that. They understand their current situation of the market from the bird's eye perspective, and they're concerned with the bigger picture and long-term trends. And they're also usually early adopters of these trends. And here's an example. This is a trend curve as we see it a lot these days. Merger and acquisitions going downhill into a bottomless pit, or a seemingly bottomless pit. I stole this graph from Peter Warman, the co-founder of Newzoo, when he spoke to our studios during one of our accelerators this year, where he basically showed the same thing. The state of the games market is crashing and burning. But then you find out, you zoom out, and you notice, oh, it was just the COVID ditch. It was just another ditch in the graph. And actually, what we perceived as a large pitfall inside the games industry was actually just a factor of us having an unprecedented pandemic event where tons of new players came to our platforms. And futures literate developers know that the state of the game market is a matter of definition. So they also have the ability to view the future with more optimism and agency. And because of that, they open themselves up to see the small signs, which we call weak signals in futures and foresight. Like this one, where we're seeing that both project and studio financing is actually warming again, even though it's low right now and it's so easy to get discouraged by that, but it's actually warming up again as well. And importantly, those people who are good at anticipating, they believe those signs earlier than others. They're a bit more optimistic about those too. So what exactly are people doing, or futures literate small and medium-sized companies do? They can, for instance, do data forecasting with what with the data that they have. They can do forecast trends. They can test ideas, and they usually do that much more. They do much more prototyping inside their companies, and they can also be much more. They do much more risk management ahead of the risk actually happening. Okay, very basic stuff. And I also hear all of our developers in the room saying okay, but what if I can barely survive right now? How do I do futures? It doesn't matter to me that I'm gonna be okay in 5 years. I need to be okay right now. And this is where, for me, resilience comes in. We all know resilience as this quality of enduring a lot of stress and pressure and difficulties. But I love looking at the definition of resilience in physics for this. Because this is what we usually kind of embrace as the definition of resilience, this just hitting a lot of stuff, and the people who know One Piece will know what's coming now, because resilience is actually not only the ability to absorb pressure and to take it on, but also to release that energy back. And so it's a lot of Tai Chi or a bit of Monkey D. Luffy And it's a lot about releasing the energy back that we're absorbing in our resilient efforts. And the example that comes to mind for me in this one is a bit of a classic. And so many of you will know this, but it's one of the reasons that I personally got interested in the games industry in the first place. So I love it. And the example is No Man's Sky. The story is a bit long to explain here in detail to those who are not familiar with what happened, but the gist is Hello Games, and in particular the head Sean Murray, overpromised before launch. Before they launched the game, they promised a fantastic game with all the features that had never been there before, and they delayed too much, they reared expectations too high, and when it did launch, nothing worked as they promised. And everybody would have bet on that company to just take the money that they made, run, and then sink, basically, never to be heard of again. But instead, what they did is that over time, they developed the tools and the functionalities that they actually promised. And there's a moment in that story that is, to me, very gripping, where they get all the backlash from their initial launch. And what they do is they take all the feedback, they put it in a database, and they just work with the data. They don't let the comments get to them. They don't let the hatred come to them. They just do a database out of that. And then they start working. They prioritize, and then they get to work on, like, what is the most important thing? What is the thing that people hate the most about this game? And then they go through that. And to me, that's an example of, like, releasing back the energy that they had. They not only endured the hit, but they actually did something with that. And that's what we see really longevity, like studios that have a lot of longevity also often doing. And now No Man's Sky is a live service title with on average 10K players at any given time. And that's 8 years after launch. So they're doing fairly well right now. And now innovation. Innovation for us can look like this. This is T-Play. They're a Turkish studio who are focusing mostly on mobile casual titles. And they had a really hard time finding somebody to publish their game. Until eventually, at maybe the last minute, they ran into BMW, who signed them for in-car entertainment eventually. And they have it now on the top of their website. But the curious thing about T-Play was that in that moment, they actually didn't really considered it a success. For them, it was sort of a last resort, and that's at least what they told me, and a big deviation from the original plan to publish their game to mainstream platforms with a regular publisher. So of course, it felt like a sort of second best solution to them, but they were actually innovating. They were innovators taking a calculated chance as it presented itself to them and being a little opportunistic about their own corporate identity in this. And they could still be a great mobile development studio, even if that IP was now constrained to in-car entertainment. So my recommendation to everybody is not to sell your soul to the next best bidder in an attempt to be maximally opportunistic. In fact, we also see that go wrong all the time. But we also see a lot more studios closing less dramatically and more gradually because they're sticking a bit too strongly to the vision that they had from the very beginning about what their company and what their products should be like, ignoring basically all the signs that are thrown at them, all the feedback, all the hints and gentle shoves to try out a different path. And because they're sticking a little bit too strongly to that, they are weeding through thorns and bushes, while next to them lies another path that promises to be much more rewarding. And the exercise here that we see the innovative studios be really good at is not to do either or, but to find this balance, to be really good at finding a balance between idealism and opportunism, to listen to new ideas or getting to know a new perspective on their own worth, even if it doesn't immediately align with who they believe they are, to question existing templates of what they're doing, to allow themselves to be wrong, and to be humble, to the point where sometimes we have to tell them that they're innovators because they don't see it themselves. So this is what we're working with right now with these three elements, and we're creating a program that at the moment has the catchy title, the Spielfabrique Studio Resilience and Innovation Program. If anybody has a good idea of what sort of acronym we could use here, would be fantastic. Please reach out to me. But until we come up with a new one, this is what we're doing. We're combining training, mentoring, and community. So anticipation in the training, we're trying to train studios and developers to be better at these anticipatory qualities, these skills. We're mentoring so that they walk through dips in their career a little bit more bravely, a little bit more resiliently, and we're building community where innovation happens because you share the wackiest ideas about what you could do or the wackiest opportunities with one another. And if you want to learn more about that, you can talk to me, but you might be asking now, like, what has any of that to do with sustainability? Because we're talking about sustainability here, and I wanted to push this idea of there is a value in economic sustainability for the rest. This is a model, and I'm now going to make most of my sustainability professors at uni faint, but this is not now, but it'll happen. This is a model, the nested model of sustainability that many of you know already, maybe. It's where the idea is that economic sustainability can only exist inside a social sustainability, so a healthy society, which in turn can only exist inside the conditions of environmental sustainability, a healthy natural ecosystem. But what we're seeing right now in reality, in the games industry, in the reality of game developers, is that the opposite is just as true. Not only in the sense that indie studios cannot afford to look into strategies for environmental sustainability without some financial sustainability, but more crucially in the sense that companies with more economic sustainability, that is more capacity for anticipation, resilience, and innovation, are generally outperforming companies at social and environmental sustainability as well. The lessons we're drawing from this is that we really should consider these dimensions of sustainability as synergetic to one another, rather than competing with one another or being in a hierarchy to one another. And if we're mindful of that, then we have a chance to not only support developers that are better at navigating the wavy currents of economic upheavals, but we will also hopefully create more capable sailors in the waters of all dimensions of sustainability. And that's something that we at Spielfabrique at least would be very excited about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. That's great. It was such a storyteller. We really like to play that game again. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. So you will be having a workshop in the afternoon as well. Is that probably? Well, we'll get back to you so you can elaborate on what kind of activity you will be having in the afternoon.
Yes, fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for now. So thank you everybody for listening. And so now we're just going to take a very, very brief break. So before we set up, during the meantime, we're going to set up the panel on the stage and live stream from here. So stay tuned and for 5 minutes, and we come back after the technical, just 5 minutes break. Thank you. Oh, well, welcome back. Hi, Gabriela.
Hey, Jenny.
Well, Gabriela, you are a seasoned, experienced business manager across different industries.
It makes me feel so old.
Oh, no way. I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to be. But your journey into the gaming industry began about the time that you joined Amplify Gaming West.
That's right.
Yeah. So then about 2 years ago, and so you joined RISE Research Institute of Sweden as a senior manager there, and also in charge of RISE Game Node.
That is true.
That is true. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So, but I will hand it over to you, to your very capable hands, and handle this panel discussion.
Thank you so
looking
much.
forward to that. Take it
Thank
away.
you. Thank you. Yeah, so Jenny introduced me a little bit. I'll just say my name is Gabriela Kalteneckar. I work with RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden, where I drive the initiative of Game Node. And today I have the distinct honor of talking to this panel of distinguished experts. And we're going to talk about a little bit what we have seen and heard this morning. And rather than me introducing yourselves, I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves instead. And let's start with my dear friend here to the right of me. Left, right. Jenny Brusk from Skövde.
Well, I actually live in Gothenburg, but I'm
See?
correction number one.
See, yeah.
Yes, Jenny, I work at Science Park Skövde though. and Sweden Game Arena, and I am the founder of a network for female game developer and game students called Donna. So I'm really into that is, social sustainability within games. So I've worked with games for more than 25 years. So I've seen most of the sort of resistance against gender equality, I guess. And typically I work with projects, so I'm also project manager for different projects regarding which you are involved in one at least, the Level Up regional games industry.
I pop up everywhere, sort
Yes.
of. Hello. So you're even more seasoned than I am.
Oh yes.
In the games
so you
industry.
can feel so young in every respect.
I feel very
I'm the
confident.
old lady.
That is very reassuring to hear. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
And next person in line.
Hello, my name is Volja Kapitonova. I'm a co-founder and managing director of Positive Impact Games. This is a Hamburg-based studio. Currently, we work on the Regreening, which is a cozy nature restoration simulation game. So I am very interested in the contemporary topics which are important for the community of game developers, or for the players. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion and handing over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Hugo Bille. I am a freelancing game developer, programmer, designer based in Gothenburg, Sweden. I'm mostly here, I suppose, because I co-founded the IGDA Climate SIG that Patrick mentioned before, the climate special interest group of the International Game Developers Association. I'm also currently working on two quite different sort of eco games, one being Ultros, which I'm wearing, that's nominated for a Green Tech Award in the Playing for the Planet Award. So I'm kind of interested in just energy efficiency measures and how we can spread those across the industry right now. And the other game being All Will Rise, that's a sort of eco-radical deck builder where you take the rich and powerful to court in a card game. So yeah, making games to save the planet in whatever way I can, I suppose.
And congratulations to the nomination. And we'll keep our fingers crossed for, is it next week the winner is announced?
I think so, maybe in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye out and our hopes up. Thank you, Hugo.
My name is Linn-Marie Edlund. I come from the very north of Sweden. I'm based in Skellefteå today. I actually started my journey at Arctic Game Lab, what that was called back then. Today I work as a producer at a company in Gothenburg called River End Games, and we're making an awesome game called Eriksholm. I'm also a Women in Games ambassador. So for me, my heart subject today is representation. And of course, sustainability, since I come from the north. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we will go geographically as well. Does this, is it on? Yeah?
That
so we'll
works
keep
too.
this like, we'll circle them around.
Perfect.
We'll share them.
Yes, I know. No, I ended up with a lot of microphones. Okay, I'll just
maybe
use
you
this
just have
one
a lot
and
to
keep
say.
everything else far away so that nothing explodes. You see me already. So my name is Patrick Parks. I'm associate professor in the game design department at Uppsala University, which means that I am staged on Campus Scotland in Visby, which is a really nice place to be in. But of course, it's also like, oh, let's save the Ringmuren forever. It's like, oh wow, yeah, good. We have our work cut out for us. I typically teach around questions of games and society. And sustainability has been the rising one. The other topic that I'm otherwise working with is political radicalization and neo-fascism in game communities, so all kinds of fun stuff. But the sustainability question really is a thing that is coming up. And when I'm talking to my students about it, they ask me, okay, so you problematize this, you draw these sort of big pictures and show us how this is all difficult, but what can we actually do about it? What is the next step? Where do we sort of get some sort of critical edge here? And basically, I've been trying to take that request to heart and follow that to be able to give them a better answer than to leave them with this sort of depressive, dark story. And this is where it has led me so far.
I'm looking forward to talk to you today about dragons. Mainly. I was very inspired by the environment and the landscape that you painted in your talk.
Thank you.
Maybe we can dive in a little bit. Maybe we should start there, because you were first up. Any comments about or thoughts? I'm looking at you, Hugo, because there was a quotation from you
About using your power, about using your power.
What did
however.
you mean with that?
Oh no, we were basically talking about taking whatever power you can find, I guess, and just doing what you can. And my example that we were talking about earlier wasn't in the case of Ultras. What we're nominated for the Green Tech Award is basically just something that I ended up throwing in the last month of development because I could, and I asked for permission later. I might not have to go into the details of that.
No.
But
I ultimately go to like world domination, power, the ultimate power. But I suspect you had a more tempered.
we're doing this together, right? And
Yes.
we're all grassroots and having whatever impact we can.
Yeah.
I think one thing that led to, and since we're talking about the Ultras impact anyway, we'll might as well finish that subject. So it's a tiny game. It has a tiny audience, and it has a pretty tiny footprint to begin with because it's lightweight, right? But we still wanted to do something. And work on energy efficiency and try to reduce like frame rate wherever we could get away with it and stuff like that. But I think where we found our real impact is in talking about it, like I'm doing now, I guess, and in being nominated for these prizes, and in showcasing in our options menu. We have sort of an energy bar that gives a really, really rough estimation of how much energy is used by the game, depending on how you pick your options. So if you go into 4K, that bar really skyrockets. And I think we found there an opportunity to have a cultural, a social kind of impact that's not only about the strict measurable carbon savings, but also about getting to moving us towards a culture where we all think about this stuff, where players are exposed to the idea that, hey, playing a game uses electricity, getting other developers exposed to it.
Inspirational
training. Solutions need to be scalable, right? They need to be transmittable. They need to,
Well, let's segue that into, we're going to talk about...
We just went off on a tangent there. What are we really talking about?
I think it's inspiring.
Yes. And I think it's an amazing feature, and I would like to hear even more about that and get that turned into something that other people can copy in their own practice. The point that I was trying to make is around capacity building, which is sort of an activist toolkit. So you basically get the people in a room and ask, so what power do we actually have in this room? What can we influence, right? And it's meant to oftentimes, and this is the metaphor of the dragon as well, we're trying to deal with something that is a big problem. You alone will not be able to defeat the dragon, right? I didn't even go that far and say it's coated in gold and, like all the sort of anti-capitalist stories in The Hobbit already. But so what can we do in challenging this big problem here? And your take here of, well, I had this power and I see what I could do with it. I think that is super inspiring because a lot of people might be in the same situation, but never really asked them this question. Okay, so what could I actually practically do today? Right? And I think in that sense, that's very powerful.
Now, is it a sense of rather do something than sit about in your little office thinking about doing something and not ever doing anything because you spend all your time planning to do something?
Yeah.
Let's frame it a little bit. So in the global north, sustainability is usually first understood as environmental sustainability. However, looking at several ESG and CSR reports, it seems as if proving gender equality improvements is a lot easier for companies than proving footprint impact. So is lip-versing in ESG report requirements easier with gender than it is with ecological sustainability, is the question.
Is what easier, sorry?
Is lip-versing in ESG reports requirements easier with gender than it is with, is it easier to find yourself in gender questions in a company rather than ecological questions? Is it easier to grasp, do you think? What do you say, Jenny?
I think for game companies, yes. I meet a lot of startups and they have no problem in identifying themselves with, we need diversity and we need to recruit typically more women to our staff and we need to make more inclusive games and all of that. That is something they can really sort of relate to and understand. But when it comes to the ecological sustainability, I think they don't really know how to do it, because they are like, okay, we work in with a game, and we don't have cars, we hardly eat, we have very little like footprint in our company in comparison to many other industries, and we don't do products in sort of physical products with and sell them like we used to do. But so I think it's really hard for them. And when I've also taught at the university, also just having a really short workshop around like in the broader sense sustainability, and it's typically that when it comes to the ecology, they can't really figure out how to approach it, and I think that's the reason. They don't. It's hard to see what you can do.
So we go to the items we can see and understand in our day-to-day life, and that translates to gender equality, diversity, inclusion? Question mark?
I would say, as one of the representatives of the people who manage companies, it is much easier to the tools are much easier to understand when it comes to gender equality than when it comes to climate impact. And I think that's why it is important to have conferences like Sustainability Nexus to talk about this, to explain the calculator, to actually be able to show the studios how to do this. Because if yesterday the legislation went through that every small studio needs to also fill in the calculator or calculate their carbon footprint, I would be like, okay, how do I even Google that? So it's important to raise awareness, and I know that raising awareness is not really something that you can measure, but when it comes to studios, I think it's absolutely important to build communities, to talk about this, to help each other out. And yeah, I would also be really interested in adding this feature to the game where you can show consumption. That's really cool. So yeah, I would agree.
Making people aware. I'm so attentively listening, so I forget my next question. But we also wrote down something here about, is it just about volume then? Do we need to reach, when talking about diversity inclusion, do we just need to pump more women, trans and gender people into the industry, you know, whatever role? Lynn-Marie, do you have any input? I'm sort of aiming towards the C-suite positions. Does it matter where we have the diversity?
Yeah, definitely. I think,
that was sort of a leading question.
We kind of talked about this before.
Like, wink, wink,
wink. Yeah, but this, I think it's important, of course, when we are doing all these like things with the diversity and sustainability, that we also talk about the dragon, that the power to make the bigger change is also by people that want to do it and not doing the greenwashing thing, like what you say. How do you say it? Like, tick a box, exactly. So it's not just ticking boxes. That now we have this and that person in a position in the company, but that they actually want to make a change for real. Yeah. And so it's not only like it's a representation, of course, and I think it's very important because then you can, get your voice heard. And I also think when it comes to, just ticking the boxes, because I think that's something that I've seen over the years, that some companies, they tap themselves on the shoulder and think that they're really good at it, but there's no change. It just, title on a paper.
Yeah. We use the term change, real change. So Jenny, I can see that you're itching. Yes. And then Patrick?
Yeah, when we started the Donor project, we had the idea that it had to start, and we had to look at it from a holistic point of view. That when you recruit new students, for instance, to the university, you must make sure that, first of all, of course, that the study environment is inclusive and welcoming for these new students that you probably haven't really had before, but also that we could invite them and sort of attract them to a welcoming and safe work life. Yes. Because that was the main issue. I mean, we had parents calling, why would I let my daughter make a career in that sort of toxic culture? It's like this unserious business. So we had to work like at all levels and like with everything. So it's about recruitment, but it's also about retention and then also helping you removing the barriers to moving further in your career, and then also make sure that the industry itself is sort of has the instruments to deal with it. And I think that we have come a lot further than 10 years ago or 15 years ago when we didn't even talk about this. So yes, it's not even only about the positions and having more. It's about everything, the consequences.
Everything needs to. I use the euphemism. We should all be in the same boat. Number one, check, and then we should all paddle. 2, check, and preferably we should all paddle in the same direction. That really makes a change. So many different things on many different levels that constitutes change is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because otherwise they will not stay. I mean, if you have a toxic environment, then they will of course leave the career. And
people don't want to work in toxic environments.
No, they don't. So then they will choose another career.
Weird. Yes.
Very easy or simple.
I can see Patrick has something on the mind.
I'm trying to, yes, thank you. But of course, I really like to hear about this holistic approach. And obviously, we are happy to send our students to the Donna presentations on the Sweden Game Conference. So great work, right? But yes, I think it's an interesting comparison to think about gender in studios and sustainability questions or ecological sustainability questions. Also because of where we allocate responsibility. If your HR department or your group of people or your studio doesn't hire women, we will generally be able to say, you, buddy, should hire more women or like non-male people or anything like that, right? This is your responsibility. But if it's about carbon emissions, then you can much more easily say, well, I'm just a game studio, right? Like, is this really what I need to do? Oh, we need to look at the energy mix, right? Like, that is the question. So, but this allocation of responsibility, this is your job. This is, I think, a big deal, and it can be very, very hard to take that seriously because yes, we don't always have perfect powers. If I think about us recruiting women to our game education, this is something we are making more clear efforts, similar to what you describe, and or more diverse people, more neurodiverse people, more gender diverse people. That's all good. But then when I'm bringing up how are we planning to recruit more people from lower socioeconomic classes? We are massively excluding people with less money from joining game educations, from becoming expressing their own cultures and perspectives, even though they would be sorely needed. Where is that happening? I get blank stares, and I am drawing a blank myself. Now I'm looking at how do I restructure the Swedish educational system? It becomes bigger and bigger, but that is also a sustainability task. And it cannot be excluded. So having this holistic approach and really challenging ourselves and seeing what would be a better future, I think is super important here. And that has to do with it's a target-rich environment. There's a lot to do.
Would we want to... Oh, sorry. I'm just thinking about what you said. Would we want to allocate responsibility for ecological sustainability in a particular place? Or is that by nature a more distributed kind of... I'm thinking of our nose representations of the circle of the things we can do that's built to target all parts of a gaming company. This is what the tech people can do. This is what the art people can do. This is what the storytelling people can do. And that's a way of distributing that. But of course, what you want is to also have someone to point to and say that, well, preferably, I guess, the CEO or in a bigger company, a sort of sustainability manager, I guess.
Patrick, can I reply before you go?
Yes, please.
This is an amazing question. And I think that in general, the answer lays why we have it as we have right now, kind of a bit distributed, is because the responsibility for climate change for the longest time was denied by the people who were responsible. And the responsibility was shifted towards other social economic classes, other problems. It was somehow just neglected in the places where it was supposed to be the biggest and most important topic. And therefore, because this culture was established to just ignore the issue in general, I think the result is we have this distributed responsibility, that everyone is responsible and no one is responsible at the same time. So a good question, if we should shifted back, and I think it's a yes. But again, how do you make everyone responsible? That's a good question.
But Vola, your company works a lot with visualizations.
Yes, we do.
Is that could that be a method? Because we're talking about a topic that isn't visible to the naked eye. You can count the number of heads in your studio, males, females, other categories. Maybe you can also even go so far as to skin color or from socioeconomic, that you can see, you can touch, you can talk to. But when it comes to impact on the environment, how do you have any ideas about, what can visualization bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. So my idea is we can engage the players as well, not only of course, the studios are responsible. When it comes to the environmental impact, studios should do their due diligence, learn about it, calculate everything, try to use renewable sources. But it's also the question of what players want to see and want to play. And basically the idea that I have is players get to know more about the ecological issues when we visualize that for them. Because when we talk about a potential climate crisis happening and we don't have any pictures to show them what this can look like, nothing is being solved and the image isn't really imprinted into their heads. When we do visualize, when we create in games, for example, alive worlds where players can see the results of the climate disasters, ecological disasters, of the impact of climate change. We know post-apocalyptic, for example, Fallout, right? We know a lot of worlds where the player just sees complete desert, nothing exists anymore. And when you put the player into that virtual space and let them explore and let them experience by themselves what this can be like, I think this increases the potentially desire for the player to change it. Or maybe the fear that is being born in the player is also basically being the motivator to explore these topics. So my idea is the game that we're working on, for example, you try to regreen the earth that was completely deserted. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think it's important to put players in that situation and also to let players have redemption from whatever happened.
That's such a powerful word. Sorry.
I see big feelings.
No, yeah, I've tried to make games about redemption as well. It's cool when it works, if it works. I don't think I've made it work. I love that you're leaning into the changing the future as well, because we have so many games already about post-apocalyptic climate disasters, and what we're really more than that missing, I think, is games that visualize what we could have, the futures that we could build. So kudos to that.
Do we think that is the prospect of having, because I also play these games, I love dystopia, post-apocalyptic, I enjoy them. Will that discourage us from focusing on not getting there in the real world? That's a loaded question, maybe. I don't know.
As an avid apocalyptic gamer and LARPer, I think I'm also an avid gamer, so I think it's, I do understand, I think it's a good thing to place them in that world, but I also think that it kind of disconnects them sometimes from the reality. I think it's a good thing to keep that kind of game as close to the real life as possible. No death clause and such in the game. But I think, like, for me also, when it comes to the discussion, I think that the education part, I think you mentioned it a little bit about sending, for the Donna days and everything. So I think for me as a parent, talking about what kind of games our upcoming gamers also want to play, I see that there's a trend that they're discussing more about what kind of games and what feelings the players get from playing the game. That's something that we work in my studio a lot with, like, what do you feel when you play the game? what kind of feeling do you get when you enter this world? I think that's also something that can also be us talking about sustainability. What kind of games do we want to leave to the next generation? Because that's something that we all are here for, to make this world better for upcoming generations. So I think education is something that I think is really important. I mean, I come from the north of Sweden. I work with 5 municipalities with horizontal criteria, and it was everything from representation, gender equality, environment, and all of that. And I think it's something that I've seen in the students in these municipalities, and also when it comes from the municipalities being very involved in understanding, like, when you start a game studio, you need somewhere to be. How can we create a building that's sustainable? So I think it's so many layers, but I think that especially education.
So visualization, moving that, perhaps, we have it in the gaming world. We can all immersive realities, maybe also transfer the visualization capabilities to educational sector and other to achieve lasting change is what I'm translating this into. Stop me if I'm going off on a limb. I feel like you want to stop me, so go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that was a leading question at all. I think it's a yes and, right? Like, apocalyptic visions, dystopias are great, and I enjoy them, and I think they have absolute function. But I think we have a lot of them right now, and I think what we are missing is a way of imagining a future where we defeated climate change and it was good, right? Like a future that shows you that this is what human life could look like after this crisis, and then maybe think about what else could we be. Maybe we could have a human society that decenters work and centers human connection, that centers equality and expression and creativity. And what would that world be looking like? And wouldn't that be the cozy game that has this vibe that I would like to play, having just come out of a global pandemic and going into the world that we're living in now, right? So I think that visualization tools like these sort of stories is something that I so far haven't seen that much. I think the fact that Terra Nil sort of nailed that is one of the reasons why it became so successful. And I think that is maybe something to highlight as a direction for the future. At the same time, the argument that you made very, very well here, that pushing the responsibility for climate change downwards to the individuals, is something that the carbon industries did on purpose, right? What we should do about climate change is keeping oil in the ground. You and I cannot do that. And the companies or people that could refuse to. So we need to find a way to push that responsibility back up, gather ourselves collectively and deal with the dragon, right? That's what it is about. Should that be the case? No, the dragon should stop burning the world, but it doesn't, right? So yes, exactly. That's why we need to get together and look at it and get together and push it back upwards.
The dragon agenda, we will return to this. I feel like I have diverged a little bit from my questionnaire here into the philosophical discussion, but I love those, so I kept it going for a while. But let's go back into the presentations that we have seen this morning. Reflections about the Susindi work project. You've mentioned it in your presentation as well, Patrick. This is an initiative that has brought out a practical tool for companies to calculate their carbon footprint, handprint, and voice print even, is I think the term that was mentioned here. Do you think, Jenny, that the companies that you work with in the incubator of Skövde, will they use it?
Yeah, but we can make them use it, and that's why it's so good. Because it's really
the dragon
hard.
with force.
Because they're supposed to work towards several different, sustainability goals. It's just that, as I said, it's really hard for them to understand how and why, and it becomes almost like overwhelming. But I think so. A tool is actually really good because it's really concrete. It's something that they can do this, and then they can feel and they can start understanding. And then I think that by understanding and seeing, what happens, they can see, wow, if we buy less, then we get better numbers. So I think it's a very good way of making people aware of the consequences of your actions. So I'm actually really happy about it because I feel it's really hard to communicate sustainability work and how sort of the system works. Of course, you're right, Patrick, when you say that we're supposed to take a look. I mean, we're supposed to sort of work with everything. It's just that when you say that to a company that is like trying to survive every day, it's like it becomes. So you need to find one thing that they can do, and and then they can contribute. And I think that every single thing they do will then sort of inspire them to do more and more. So I'm really always back to like start with a little thing, and then see how you can become better and more interested and inspired, and then they can invent. But then they can also be those ambassadors in the community fighting the dragon, I guess.
Well, fighting the dragon, training the dragon, we need to address the dragon in any case, right? But this is of course a result of legislation that is coming down from the EU, and I'm hearing that smaller companies are not directly affected, but the companies that buy their games and finance them may be affected. So it's still important for even SMEs, small and mid-sized enterprises, to be aware, to have a visualization internally, if not physically.
I think that they're willing to do it. They just don't know how. So I think that's the thing. They're of course really positive towards this.
So what can small companies do other than filling in this this tool that has been taken out? Are there more things that the computer industry specifically are prone to, or geared towards? Do you think? Maybe a practical example from Prague? With all the skills and the storytelling narratives and everything, is there anything else that small companies are?
Small companies need to survive to become bigger companies with bigger impact and do more. I think as you said as well, the company which is trying to survive every day, it's very difficult to do anything on top of the usual operations and business as usual. But when it comes to I think the practical ways, we know that game studios usually do first game and it flops, and then the second game and possibly it also flops, and then the third game maybe will get the investment back. And then the third one possibly will get a little more, because with experience comes a bit more sustainability as well and financial results. And in that case, I think really the focus is to focus on one or two things that you can do. And then as you grow bigger, also try to do the best with the abilities that you have. That's my understanding of the issue.
I would perhaps add, because a lot of the time in smaller companies especially, you have people who really care about an issue and want to do something, whether they have great power or not. And I guess we come back to using whatever power you have. But one power that small companies have specifically is innovation. They have a much easier time trying things that others haven't. So I think a great question to ask, if you are passionate about any kind of social impact as a small company or as working in a small company, is what is the thing that only you could do?
Innovation.
Yeah, but a lot of the time I think you're going to find yourself in a position where if you just really look at what are your circumstances that the bigger companies don't have, the companies in other parts of the world might not have. I think Arnaud calls this not the unique selling point, but the unique impact potential, the UIP of your project. If you look for that, I think that's especially impactful for smaller companies, because they can then produce innovations, kind of like we aim to do with the energy bar in Ultros, I guess, that then has the potential to grow wings and fly.
I smell a side quest here, because you mentioned innovation, which I think is absolutely true. Innovation usually comes from exploration in cultural or creative sectors. And we have no public funding for startups in the computer games industry per se today in Sweden. I know Germany just got it. So you opened, I think, 2 months before.
Germany got it some time before. There's a German fund, but Czech Republic is pushing for the fund for game developers. Yeah.
So we're going to dive a little bit into the financial side of this in a moment. So I'm going to table the innovation, because we do have public funding for innovation startups. And for me, games are innovative, right? We're trying to solve problems via exploration, right? So let's keep that in the back of our head. But I see Patrick has also a comment on the small companies,
Yes.
mid-sized companies.
And I mean, just continuing on Hugo's point here, right? Like, where you are an example of you did something that is really ahead of the curve and ahead of what other human-computer interaction research would be indicating as making these sort of impacts clear to players or users so that they can make informed choices, right? It's really online there and going beyond. So that is really amazing, right? So now the next step that we could, or I think should take, is having tools like this that show in some capacity energy usage and then maybe even cost during something like an electricity cost crisis specifically to players as a default. So a step is missing where this sort of knowledge could be best practices, could be then lifted up to this is something we should now implement everybody and then turn it into policy. So that is something that, yes, bigger actors should be doing, but maybe there's a potential for also small and mid-sized companies to make their voice heard in relation to their branch organization, in relation to their representatives, to say, yes, we would actually like to have more support in bringing these things up so that everybody has to do this, so that the playing field becomes level in a way that the amazing sustainability innovations from a small or mid-sized game studio become something that we can now do in the entire Swedish games industry. And then it also means that we are still competing and making games on a fair playing field. It's just a fair playing field that is a little bit less toxic to the world we live in. And I think that sort of step would be interesting. And that's what I mean with taking it more towards a systemic consequence and a systemic approach. And taking these sort of, highlighting this is great, let's do this everywhere, right? And experiment with it on a bigger scale and see how that would function.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
I'm taking over now.
Not to me.
No, but there was one thing that I really came to think. You had someone from that had a GDC talk. I don't remember the name.
Anno.
And you showed that he works really, of making game developers implement, like, I guess, sustainable, like game design or something. And then I started to think about all, for instance, the Sweet Baby Inc. that got harassed now because they work, they help companies with storytelling, basically. And now they are it's a new Gamergate. And I was thinking, when you do diversity things, you get these warriors from the alt-right movement in the USA, and you get haunted by them. If you do that, like with the other sustainability things, is there a risk that they will haunt you as well, or do they don't care because it is not necessarily women and other sort of people that do it, but it's perhaps like you as a white man? Is that okay for you to do that then? Do you see what I mean? Will you get? I was just so curious to see if this is something that will come back as a war against the games industry.
Can I
go nuts?
Yeah, because it's really interesting in a way. Because I think a lot of the diversity engagement with the industry it came a couple of years before the green wave sort of started. So that initiative has it's so much of what we're trying to replicate in a way in green games, and this is one of the things. It still hasn't really hit us. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But one of my greatest fears is that eventually the green movement will be large enough to attract that kind of attention and essentially become an alt-right narrative of they're trying to take our video games away, which could potentially produce like even more of a problem than all the positive impact we've had, essentially. So that's something I think we need to be very careful about, and I think the industry currently is very careful about making like energy efficiency measures and stuff not being about being the detriment of the play experience, much as I honestly would like it to be sometimes. Like, we don't need 4K is my personal stance. But if that
it makes me seasick, so I agree with you 100%.
But there's such a risk of backlash there that I'm really worried about.
So we're now moving into another mythological creature, Waking the Kraken. We want to be aware that the Kraken exists, and we don't want the backlash of the Kraken, right?
Yes.
This is what I'm translating this into. Question mark.
Yeah, or we need to handle it. I mean, we do want to grow as large and powerful. So large and powerful that we do inevitably wake the Kraken. But how do we
without him
survive that.
surviving the Kraken when he has awoken.
And I mean, 2 points. A, the Kraken isn't having a good time either, right? Like, just outside of this, like, in our metaphorical perception here, typically young men who go and become online warriors to bash on a game studio that wants to lose, they're not well adjusted either, right? So, but yes, this is a real fear, and it's not in the future, as Hugo points out, it's already now. So already now in conversations at the special interest group, this is a topic. Where do we need to be careful in order to not become the next target for this? And it leads to the self-censorship that you would expect. It leads to managers shutting down things because they're worried about that. Yes, sadly, the specter of Gamergate and of this sort of toxic, I don't really want to call it activism, but I kind of guess I have to, actions, they are there. I think as a white man right now, what I have seen when Gamergate started digging DIGRA, like the Digital Games Research Association, they were only going after not men, right? They were only looking for soft targets. They would dig out a paper, say this is a cultural Marxist paper, and then start harassing only the female authors, not the first or second author that were men, but only the women. So this puts us in a straight. I can say, hey, be more radical, and then what? Risk the security of the non-binary people and women that are in my department, right? It's like it's a horrible situation to be in. I guess our responsibility then becomes to try to shield people around us as much as possible by being the ones that carrying the most radical torches as much as we can. It remains to be seen what the consequences of that are. Nobody wants to get doxxed, right? But people around me, people that work on my PhD defense, my supervisor, they all had some sort of negative impact from Gamergate as games researchers.
I just want to circle back to green games and the financial side of aspects. We only have 45 minutes, so sorry for pushing the envelope. But returning to the financial incentive, we need to sort of make these things happen in real life, and with no public funding for small startup gaming companies, I have seen a lot of movement in the last couple of years of successful games companies, small companies still, maybe they've produced a game or two, and they now want to give back to society. They have different focuses. Some want to change the behavior of people. Some aim to support children who are in need of medical care and make the communication between parents and children easier. There are a lot of these passionate driven projects, and one method is to gate off a part of your game and to sell that part to public actors. So yeah, I went off on a limb here, sorry. But the point of this is how to seek finance for projects that are green games. What are green games? How do you finance these initiatives? And are they interesting to the general public? There was 3 questions baked into one. Let's go around the table. Let's start with the general public, maybe.
Right. The regreening is funded by Game City Hamburg Fund, which is sponsored by Germany. And that means that this is public money, and the fund in general, we don't have to give it back. So this is one way to approach it. You approach the actors which actually care about producing games and supporting games which will have some kind of positive impact. But when it comes to investors, investors care about the return of investment. And the fact that the game is going to have positive impact in any way, in ecological, sociological, in any way, doesn't guarantee that it will have the return of investment, and therefore investors quite often decide to not take it as seriously. Therefore, it's a question still. I think that the games, it would be amazing if the games had some positive impact and some sustainability basically binded in them. But they also have to be just, everyone hates this word, but fun. And they have to be engaging, and they have to be have to be promising for the investors to actually put in the money into the games. And I think that we can trick the system sometimes, and we can not pitch the game as advocating for something. But when you're talking with investors, it's also important to push on the buttons that they will appreciate and like, instead of the green game USP, as to say.
Let's hover a moment over investors. So when we pitch this green games to investors, are we talking about investors who traditionally invest in games development companies?
I would say even a publishing deal is an investment. So we can talk about angel investors, we can talk about publishers, and publishers also have their own systems of choosing which games they will invest in, because they also expect return of investment to keep investing into more games. So I would say all investors, if that makes sense. The public investors, the states and the European Union in general, we all know that the media fund, European Media Fund, also has a whole point of sustainability. And I think this is wonderful and awesome, but unfortunately they don't support studios which just started out, because they want you to have a game already released in the last couple of years. Therefore, new studios go to investors, either to angels, or they just call out a couple of friends and ask them for a buck in the pocket.
Or two.
Or two, or free. Depends on the game, right? But
okay.
Yeah.
But so are there are obviously in a lot of European countries there are innovation funds that help small, mid-sized startup companies to raise funds for their initial prospect. A lot of those comes with a reservation, though, that they give you 50% to mitigate the risk of an investor to fund the rest of the process, because it's all about risk assessment, right? So if I invest millions of dollars, kroner, euros, I don't know which currency to use, we're multicultural here in Europe, money.
A buck.
A buck, exactly. If you invest $1, $2, or $3, you want to make sure that you return some of that, so you can invest that in other businesses. That's how marketing economics works, right? So how do we make the people with the bucks interested in green games? How do you pitch a green game? I'm looking at you. Everyone is looking to you now. Don't
you have to say something.
I feel like you might have the answer to all of our burning questions.
I don't have the answers. I know a lot of people are searching for them, and I look forward to seeing the results. I heard before that you have a project around how to find funds for this kind of stuff. Maybe you can speak to that. But
I'm the master of leading questions today. I apologize.
There are also, I know, of a few different science projects out there right now trying to probe these waters. Like, how can we find funds for these games that we know that we need as a culture, inside traditional games publishing, but mostly, I guess, opening ways for getting funds from other places. We've been experimenting with this ourselves with All Will Rise. Because it's a pretty deeply political game, and we know that there are NGOs out there that want this game to exist, that passionately want this game to exist, but there aren't the right channels really open for them to facilitate that at the moment. So I think there's some sort of financial infrastructure to be built. Because from what I hear, not least from Travis York's report, the name of which I forget, that there's a real discrepancy in timescales, that we need the money much faster than they can give us. So hopefully projects like Strategies that was mentioned before can go some distance towards exploring how we can sort of open that door.
Yeah.
Because it seems quite closed at the moment, and it shouldn't have to be.
I'm sort of fishing here for, is it a good deal to invest in? Because when we're talking about climate change, which is non-visible, which is sort of, we will all suffer it in the end. We're all in the same boat on that, no escaping. Even though we like to imagine ourselves in a Star Trek universe where we travel to other planets, we're not there yet. So there is no escaping this reality that we live in. But when we talk about these kind of changes, is it true that they mostly gear towards savings? We want to save We want to stop a certain process of destroying the planet. We want to save money with, streamlining an educational process, or visualizations going to if we use that in educational sectors to achieve better results that will save us money rather than gain money. So we're not aiming serious games or green games into the consumer market necessarily. We're selling the game to someone else. Who are we? What is the market for this? Maybe it's a little bit of a wrong question, but I think if we bear with us, we might get there.
No, I think there's a number of mainstream games that have been very political, and I think that there is definitely a possibility in game creation to attract talent, to do good writing, to do good indexical or environmental storytelling, which is one of the key things and topics of, for example, these post-apocalyptic perspectives. To tell good stories, at some point you need to touch on something human, right? It's going to be very, very hard to make a great game that doesn't speak to something that relates in an interesting way to the human experience. So I think that in order to make a great game, it's already a good idea to deal with these topics. That to have something that rings true, that is human, and that deals with a part of the world that is out there. That doesn't, of course, mean that this is easy, right? Like an added requirement on your design, have fun gunplay, cool interactive. Oh, and yes, then you need to have this amazing political philosophy underlying your character's actions, and everything needs to be developed in the background, and what happened 10 years ago on the timeline. It just, that becomes very hard. Some masterpieces manage that, right? BioShock was revelatory for me. And it's a horror shooter that also criticizes libertarian economic policy, right? That is wild. So that these sort of things exist. That doesn't mean that necessarily you need to lead with that when you're attracting funding, because if you're making a great game, I think a good way is to say that we have a great story because it touches on these things that are now part of the zeitgeist and that people want to communicate around and talk about. I think that is the smart way of trying to combine that a little bit. Because on the other hand, the other part of angel investors, or what I hear from our contributors that have and small investment organizations that are looking specifically for social justice projects, for them, maybe return of investment isn't their main concern, but it is building this community first, building people that can support each other, building an ecosystem, and then hoping or expecting, maybe based on their experience, that also economically this will work out by building the group that is interested in this in the first place, right? So there's something to be said for a diverse team will probably make a better product than one that's only white dudes, right? And so,
well, that product might be better for white dudes, but then you... I'm turning back to philosophy all the time. I'm sorry.
I think that's doubtful. But I think just talking for real about the world and the struggles that we live in as human beings is just making good culture.
Yes. I sense the question from my right.
Oh, no.
No?
I sense the answer from her.
See? Lynn-Marie.
I'm just trying to gather all my thoughts. But I do agree, and I just want to beam back to reference Star Trek into, I'm trying to remember what my thoughts were here, but to pitch a game. I think that has been working with at an investment company. And I've seen a lot of pitches. I think that's a good thing to talk about the actual game. I think the rest that you want to be a sustainable company comes kind of with it. Like eventually, of course, if you have the people behind it. And I think it's from being on the other end, I think it's very important that that's a goal. Like we want to be in 5 years, because you also want to have that goal, like what are you doing in 5 years as an investor? Not only now, but we want to invest in you for the long term, hopefully. But I also think that with you, that you were talking about, as I said before, that you're making games to make other people feel different things, to feel committed, because that's how you grow a community. You make them feel something about your product. So I think that when you talk about your game, it could be, you know, through marketing or communities. I think it's about how you speak about your game, how you talk about what your studio wants. So I think it's a lot of things that you can do to make your studio seen and your game seen. About this, the small things leads to greater things.
See,
No,
I did sense a question
No,
here.
it
I
was
wasn't
more
wrong.
a comment,
Thank you.
actually. No,
Yeah.
because I think that this is so interesting, because we made this project to sort of inspire more women in games to become entrepreneurs. And the reason, because we sent out a survey to see, okay, if you would start a company, why? Like, what would be the motivation? And like, a typical answer from the female and non-binary group was that, well, to make unconventional games for unconventional players, to create an inclusive and diverse work culture thing. Like almost all of the answers were around that. So I'm thinking that we're talking about like who will create these games and who will create these workplaces and who will, you know, I think that we have something here, and then we will also make innovations because they will create unconventional games for new players. So we have a little sort of encouragement here that we need more diversity among the game companies to actually accelerate the sustainability. So work with that.
And I think that's a really positive conclusion of this panel. I think we have about 1 minute left. I'm checking for time. Yes, 1 minute. Do we have, you know, a final comment from anyone in this expert panel on, you know, what does the future look like? What should we aim to gain from low-hanging fruits that can help us in our sustainability journey? I'm also a master of making really complex questions. It's not an easy answer, and maybe we won't answer it here today. I think you've all given a lot of insights, except maybe, yes?
I think the low-hanging fruit, the annoying part with this greenwashing perspective is that it can sometimes make it appear as if you do something that's easy, that's not good enough. That is not really my point. My point is, or I think the point of all of us in this conversation is that yes, there is a long-term goal, and we need to keep that in mind. It needs to be the systemic change. That doesn't mean that the thing you do today or that the organization or the people that you meet to get together with aren't good enough. They are the starting point. They need to be the starting point. In order to survive this as people, we need to have an in-group with which we can communicate through this complex concept that is written with existential angst as well to get to the systemic. So what you do today still matters. Yes, it should point towards something in the future, the systemic change, but this starting point today with the people around you is still amazing.
So we need to start somewhere, and we have today. So with that, thank you so much for being part of this panel and sharing your insights. And I want to give you a little bit of applause, just for me. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I take it's yours? Yeah. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, and I wish we could have more time. I could listen and listen to you for ages. Thank you so much. Really interesting insights. I'm sure that our online audience also enjoyed this very much. Some might only have jumped in for the panel, so they might not have heard introductions beforehand from our satellite locations. And in particular, Game Habitat already presented themselves, but Jesper, if you are ready to say hello, because we're doing this a bit like with the football, with the we'll have hellos from our satellite groups, and they will introduce again what they're doing. As I said, 2 of them, the one in Game Habitat and the one in Cologne, are hybrid, so everybody can join them. Here, oh, it looked as if you have bottle in your hand. Hi, Jesper.
Hi. Hello, Stockholm. Yeah, we're still here at Malmö and getting ready for the workshop this afternoon, which I believe begins at 1:45, which will be a more thorough workshop around the tool set for carbon calculation that was presented earlier today. So we're looking forward to hosting that later today, and all the people who are interested in joining and kind of getting their start in actually calculating their carbon footprint. So yeah.
Thank you, Jesper. Just to repeat that, on the left-hand side in the menu, you will have a button that says Afternoon Sessions. If you click on that, then you will see the 2 breakout rooms, and you will see the one that Jesper just presented. And if you want to deep dive into that tool and get some hands-on guidance, because you and we are going to be there to help you use the tool for your, to just test it out. Okay, thank you, Jesper. Have fun. Have a good workshop. And we speak we hear about the workshop at 3:30. Okay, bye. Then we move on to Hello Cologne.
Hello, Stockholm. Boy, I kicked off something here now. Yes.
So tell us about your workshop this afternoon.
We will have a workshop on policy. So we are asking the question is, what can we do right now? How can we envision a better future, and what are the steps to get there? And we're doing that in conversation with studios, with industry representatives, and with policymakers. And you can join us online. It's going to be fully interactive. There's going to be lots of conversations. There's going to be visioning. There's going to be doodles. It's going to be a great load of fun.
Great. Sounds really interesting. We're going to join. I'm going to join, definitely. So again, on the in the afternoon sessions, you will find a breakout room that would lead you to Cologne and join their doodling and workshop and whatever they're doing there. And then we have a third location. Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. Have fun. And we hear about your results later this afternoon. And then we have a third location, a third satellite. They're doing a workshop at the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin, HTW, and their game design department, DHive.
Yes, hi everyone.
Oh yeah, everybody's already seeing it. Bravo. Well done. So Tony,
yes.
Tell us about what's happening in Berlin.
We're here today with some of our incubator teams and master students, and we're going to be conducting our own local session here on green game design, meaning that we're going to be focusing mostly on how to bake the concept of sustainability directly into a game system mechanics, rather than looking at external factors. And yeah, we're looking forward to see you all back here later this afternoon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It was a bit difficult to do this hybrid, so they're doing it local, but that's the idea, that the Nexus just connects different kind of initiatives, or even just one-time events or workshops. And thank you for joining us, and good luck this afternoon, and we're looking forward to hearing about your results. See you later. Bye.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye-bye.
Okay, and we are now having a break. You either join the afternoon sessions, but you definitely need to join us at 3:30 when we get back to our different satellite locations, and they will tell us about what happened in the afternoons. Thank you, and see you then. Thank you for joining. Bye. Hello, Malmö. Are you there?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you yet, though.
Awesome.
Oh, there you are. There you are. Hi. Can you see
I
us?
love when it works.
Can you see us?
Yes.
Come on, tell us what happened this afternoon. We're so curious to hear.
Yeah. So of course, I mean, what mainly happened was that we went through the.
Hello, Malmö.
Yes.
Are you there?
Sorry. Yes.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Just have some technical assistance. I'm sorry.
Jet lag.
Yeah, if you can hear me again.
Yes.
At the workshop, of course, we went through the tool and tried some different examples of how to use it. But as a consequence of that, some interesting discussions also popped up. For example, how do we avoid counting double? If you're a publisher and you have you've made a deal with the studio to make a game, should both of you count the CO2 emissions from that game? And while there are no 100% clear rules, I mean the advice was to kind of look at calculating emission the same way as you do financials. So if it's part of your financial report, then it should also be part of your sustainability report or like part of your emission calculations. And in any case, it's just a question of being transparent about what you're doing, saying that, you know, we're calculating it this way because we are incorporating 40% of whatever, because we're getting a 40% cut of the revenue of this game or whatever. Just be open and transparent about what you're doing. That is what is most important, because then people will understand why you are doing what you're doing. And then we also discussed about that for a lot of these calculations, we still need more data, because a lot of it is very approximations, averages that are just being used that are not necessarily 100% precise. And some of the different tools also use different averages. So you can do the same calculation using, you can do the same report for using different tools and you will get somewhat different results. And that's okay, because the data and the tools are still so underdeveloped that they have not yet reached a level where they kind of everybody agrees on how things should be calculated. But the idea was that it's better to do it imprecisely than not doing it at all. Because if you're waiting for the model to become perfect, you're going to be waiting a long time. And if you are big enough, you will very soon have to report make a sustainability report as per EU legislation. So it's better to use some incomplete data or not totally precise data than not doing it at all. Yes, so that was basically what we did, and then we kind of went through the different aspects of the report and looked at the different things of it, and we made an example, just a test run, which shows that for game developers, it is especially the usage of the product that generates the largest amount of CO2 emissions. It is what happens at the end user, and then we also discuss some of the issues with that, because that is very hard to measure, because that is like what happens at it's much easier to control what's happening at scope 1 and scope 2, because that's what you have like direct contact with. But measuring what actually goes on at the end user is much more difficult, and also much more difficult to measure if you do some initiatives, what kind of effect does that actually have? So I think that was in broad terms what we discussed here, or that was the discussions that spawned from going through the tool and how to use it.
Thank you, Jesper. We actually decided that we're going to ask perhaps 1 or 2 questions, perhaps unnecessary to you, but into the round. And am I allowed to ask 1 question? We already have 1 question. No? Last year, we presented another tool that also calculates the CO2. Do you remember? This was the French guy. And I'm wondering, when you're talking about data that's needed, more and more data, are these projects, and perhaps that's also a question to you, Gabriel, are these projects connecting with each other to share data? And are you connecting with something like SGA, who's doing a model and obviously also working on these things? Are you working together and sharing the data? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Gabriela is answering.
Was that a question for me?
Well, into the round, whoever feels comfortable.
Yeah, I can give a quick shot then. We actually discussed it, especially about the difficulty of measuring precisely for the actual energy usage and thus emissions for the usage of games. And I know that they refer to this. Apparently, there's a French model called Gyros, which is actually supposedly very good at calculating specifically that.
Oh.
But other than that, I think the issue is also that the EU legislation is incorporated into each of the national legislations, which means that in Sweden, there is a Swedish interpretation of the EU legislation. And I think that there are some nuanced differences between countries in how it is, is specifically translated into a national legislation.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to echo that, so thank you for mentioning that, Jesper. You saved me some breath. But in regard then to the collection of data, maybe, and the project itself, we do aim as a project organization, as I think all project organizations do that are public, to share information with other projects and other initiatives, and to collaborate on a broad spectrum. Could we do better with this? Absolutely. There's definitely room for improvement and doing this in a more systemic way. So, you know, it's been very interesting to listen in today to the talks, and I was a small part of the Susindi project, and it's not finished yet. So the report is just one of the deliverables. And as Patrick had mentioned, there are more deliverables to be made before the project closes. But the tool and the delivery of the tool is one way. And by the collection of data for the companies, that is out of the project's scope. So I would hope, and it would be very interesting to see how Sweden has interpreted the EU legislation rules and what that effect will have. And we won't know that until a bit longer into the future when we've done this for a couple of years, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other?
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that. And also to Jesper. So how do you plan to deploy the toolbox or the toolkit? Or is it like is it free for everybody to grab, or how do you deploy it? Probably from the right side to deploy it nationally, or was there also your ambition to deploy it internationally?
The tool is deployed by the Swedish Games Association, so it is available already now. So anyone with access to internet could potentially go into there and download the tool. And with respect to what Jesper is saying, there could be different nuances in different countries to this legislation, but I also agree with what Jesper said. It's better to do a few mistakes now in the beginning and to just get the routine going and to get this into the company. It is a compliance issue, right? So you have to keep an eye on legislation, you have to report, you have to turn your taxes in, etc. So make it a part of your day-to-day operations, I would say, and try and do it as best you can. And begin. We have to begin somewhere. And these things will iron itself out in time, I think. There is a lot of unknowns still.
Okay. So it's free to grab, and it's,
up for grabs.
Yeah, up for grab, and still, copy, still with pride, or something like that.
Just do it. Yeah, well, it is open for everyone to use. That's the point of it. And it's free.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesper. Well done.
Well done to you.
Yeah. Okay, well, stay online, but we'll move over to Cologne. Bye-bye, Malmö.
We love the votes of the Malmö jury.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello.
Mattis, are you online?
Yes.
Are you with us? Great. We're very keen to hear what happened in your workshop.
There I am. Oh, hold on.
We can't see you yet, but we see your name.
I'm speaker Cologne. I'm not like in Zoom at least. I will be another one.
Okay. That's why we couldn't see you earlier, because we only had Mattis Linde there.
Do you see me waving?
Hold on. You'll come. There you are. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sweet. Hi. So I have two surprises for you in my reporting. The first surprise is that I'm going to be joined by a fantastic person who co-led the workshop with us. Joost Verwoerd is here, who made this happen. So hold on, I'm gonna try and make space for you here in the frame. There we are. And the surprise I have for you is that we've had somebody record what we've done here in a very visual form, and we are here to share that with you to underline basically what we've done. But I'm going to hand it over to Joost now to explain what were our findings in our discussions.
Yeah, thanks, Mattis. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, so here we have this this wonderful visualization that sort of summarizes what we talked about. So I led a discussion with our group here about lots of different issues. It was focused all about How can we reconsider how games can contribute to societal change and societal transformation? Starting maybe with this sense that that you see here at the top left, that games can be both deeply serious and deeply playful, and that deep seriousness and deep playfulness do not have to be opposites, but they can be both, can be moves away from superficiality and sort of day to day into the depth of experience. We talked a bit about games as psychedelics. You know, when people take psychedelics, they know often that they're up for both maybe entertaining but also potentially challenging experience that might reveal some deep stuff about themselves. And so I've written about this before, but it's an interesting model to think about what we can do with games that are interested in going deeper into sort of societal issues in a playful but also in a serious way. We spoke about this model of 9 dimensions, that's sort of these different ways of looking at how games relate to societal change. And then our conversations were a lot about what do we want to see in the games industry, and how do we want to see things change. Some things that we wanted to sort of prevent or work with is this sense that games are often disappearing, that the platforms are very limited, and that we don't have a good archiving of games. And when we don't have an archiving of games, we are losing sort of all these potential for future inspirations. We talked about games and degrowth. We talked about games and sort of and diversity in the people who create games. The way that smaller game companies are not being protected from sort of financial interests, and yeah, there's been a lot of conversation in this panel here about the need to speak between policymakers and people who are interested in impact investment and sort of societal change and the games industry, and that gap is quite significant, and a lot of work needs to be done for mutual understanding there, because lots of people don't understand each other's worlds there. So we talked a lot about this. And generally using this model of the X curve, which is a model that's about systems change, to talk about lots of these different things that we need to see disappearing and things that we need to see sort of propped up. And in some ways, there's a fear that we move backward in our understanding and reception of what games can offer to society, which is not great, you know. And we talked about other things like market research as well, that we need to understand new markets, we need to understand what players want better and ask different questions than have been asked. That's a little bit of a summary. We talked about much more, but that's sort of what you see on the screen here. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christine, do you have
any? But Tony, just a moment. We're still in Cologne for the moment, but we can't see Mattis. Can you come back to the screen? Yeah, both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So, do we have? What was the unionization discussion about?
Yeah, we spoke about the importance of unions and social organization and sort of economic organization among game developers as a way to push back at some of the forces that are currently pressuring the games industry. So we spoke about that for a bit.
So, any questions from?
I'm very impressed. I'm really impressed at what you achieved. So have you identified any actionable points and, anything that are low-hanging fruits that you can go about and put into action? Most of them probably long-term if you want to make, societal impact. So what's the next step for you?
Yeah, I think we came up with a bunch of next steps, but I think an important next step for us, also with the strategies project that some people are here with, is to really create a platform where we bring together folks who are interested in games from a societal change perspective and people from the games industry, so that we can start speaking the same language, we can start understanding how games contribute to society and what to do about that, and how to change the infrastructures that maybe support or sort of stop that societal contribution. One thing that we talked about is that we need to gather a lot of the evidence that's there about how games matter for society in many different disciplines, right? So not only, like, a lot of people often look at behavioral change or individual impacts, but there's cultural impacts, there's impacts on social sort of connection or organization and social movements and so on that are all there, but it's all a little bit fragmented, and we want to bring that together, especially for people who just don't know games that well, right? Who are interested in it. There's many people out there interested in funding cultural work, but they exclude games, so partly because they don't know, and partly because they see games as a commercial industry in a way that that maybe other cultural sectors aren't really so much. But just because it's a very commercial sector doesn't mean it has a huge contribution to make to society. So there's a lot of lack of knowledge there and a lack of collaboration, right?
That might be the low-hanging fruit for us. Yeah, to create, to make more, to be more efficient in that, right? In the spreading of who we are, but also in the building of these synergies.
Did someone?
Well, at this point, I think you've said a lot of the questions that I had has been answered already. So I'll just say fantastic visuals and fantastic discussions. It's almost a shame we weren't there with you.
It was a shame. It was a shame. But
we're there in spirit.
Okay, well, no, really, as I can only join you all. It's really impressive. The last thing you said, Joost, made me think about something we discussed with JP from Dutch Game Garden, the fact that it's very difficult also when you're looking for regional funding, for example, or funding anyway in that kind of outside programs, just more general funding, it's very difficult to explain to these people the role that, the societal change role that games and the impact that they can make. It's somehow, it's said, but it's very difficult to prove and to measure perhaps even. And that would be so helpful if the strategies project will achieve a bit more in that direction as well, and then help regional authorities understand what it's all about.
Yeah, I think you're really right. I'm also there on the picture there. It also said All Will Rise, which is a game that we've been working on, and talking to these types of funders around maybe being interested in helping to develop a game is quite hard, because people just don't have the frames for it. They don't know why it would be valuable, and they don't have maybe the funding structures for it that take games into account at all, and they still need to be created. So I totally agree. So it's a nice challenge for strategies for sure.
Okay, thank you, Cologne. Thank you for this wonderful summary. And we move to Berlin. Oops.
Right, hello, good afternoon from Berlin once more.
Hello.
Today, Lenya, one of our master students, who's going to share what we've done today in our workshop session. And for that, I'm just quickly going to share our Miro board.
Okay.
Which you should be able to see now.
Yes, another visual, great.
All right, Lenya.
Yeah, hi.
I need to zoom in. Yeah.
Talked about a lot was making something of a guideline pager, or just like collect things that we can do as like indie studios or students in our games to, develop something more sustainable and collect some things. And we had a lot of things that we came up with, a lot of things were discussed, but mainly, like it has already been said, that we thought the biggest impact that we can have is on the players. Those are the most people that are going to impact this thing. So it's basically how can we make the product more sustainable? So that has the biggest impact. And basically we had 3 big points that we came up with, or we could summarize this in. And those were, we started with game design, or basically minimalism in game design. Because we said, or we asked the question, what features, what things do I actually need in order to create the experience that I want for the players, and try to leave out everything else to make the game or the whole experience as small as possible. Because if it's a smaller game, if it's a smaller thing, then it just uses less data, less performance it's needed on the devices that the users use. So everything, like even starting with the design, you can think about what do I actually need and leave out everything else. And then it also goes to development, and with data sizes and image sizes and everything, and the size of the game that you have. Keep it small, keep it simple, but only make it as big as you need for the experience that you want to create. And then we also said that we want to, like the third point that we identified is how do we use the game as like a platform to spread awareness? And those can be little things as, like little nudges, little messages, indirect messages in the gameplay, but also things like reframing certain things, like we talked about the low quality settings, for example, that maybe uses less resources on the machine. And instead of calling it low quality settings, we call it like the eco mode, like the green mode or whatever. That would maybe encourage players to use this setting instead of, saying, oh, I want the highest quality, I want the best textures, I want the best resolution, that gives me the best experience, but reframing all these things. So subtle things like these and other wording you can use to create a different player behavior. Because as I said, we don't really have a lot of control over what the player does in the end, but these little things in design can also be useful. I think those were the main points.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay. Any questions? That sounds really like a very productive workshop. Oh, here.
Yeah, but a couple of times now we've also discussed this, that it is actually the player. It's the players that creates the most carbon. Thank you. So I was thinking, like a very provocative thought would be that, okay, so there are some countries that are having that do not use renewable energy. Should we stop selling our games in those countries, and then we would save a lot of energy? Or I don't know. No, but I was just thinking that it seems like that is like that would make the most impact.
Maybe
It's sad to say, but what would happen if we did that?
How about maybe they're not aware of that, do you think? Because in other industries, very much consumer driven. Textile industry, fashion industry, very driven by very environmental conscious consumers. Do we have also very, environment conscious players out there, or social conscious, player out there? That's the question I think. I mean, other industry very driven by consumer. We see the consumers are really making demands that, pushing the industry become more sustainable in all ways. And that's why I think it's the storytelling and narratives, and that maybe it's education as well, all that.
So, like maybe, sorry, thank you. Maybe some kind of like, I mean, when we look at PDI, what do you call it? PDI. Yeah, I mean, we measure games through that in a way, with violence and so on. If we're gonna make games in a sustainable way, the consumers, because they tend to not want to look for that for themselves. The rating, how rated is the game in that way. I think that you have to make the consumer more involved in a way. Like I said earlier today, that like if you talk about your game, that you are doing it in a sustainable way, they will know. But I think also the people not following your community, they will never know if people don't talk about it, or if they don't have some, I don't know, something.
Rating.
Yeah.
Ranking.
I think that would be a good way. Maybe they have a point system. Like if you're a 5, you're a really good sustainable game.
Can I ask something to a provocative, counter-provocative against, because it reminds me of e-cars. It seems as if we're now doing a lot of things that require just a lot of electricity, and then we just say, well, but let's just use renewable. But we will not be able to create so much renewable energy, so we really need to reduce. And I think what you've been talking about in Berlin is how to reduce the energy consumption. And I think that's what we tend to forget, because now the solution seems to be, we just use renewable energy. So, of course we could say not sell it to countries
it was
that...
Actually just
I know, but it comes up all the time. With Poland, I think is not very good. I'm not sure, but I know that some... Sorry?
The hardware needs to follow that as well. The hardware decides.
Yeah.
So that also needs to follow like
Exactly.
the progress of.
Yeah.
Thank
Do
you.
you do you want to? Sorry, we're starting. Do you have an answer from your group to any of these remarks?
Absolutely.
Maybe one aspect, I think this also relates to the third point we were talking about, which is using the game as a platform, the visibility that you create when publishing a game to also, talk to the players in a way. And I think if you decided to pull out and not distribute your game to a country because, of the impact you have, because of the amount of renewable energy being used there, you also lose this communication channel that you can build up to bring across this point, like talk about, or like not talk about directly, but maybe, in a subtle way within the game design to these players and maybe get them on board to change the situation in their country as well.
Good point.
Very good point.
Thank you.
And then also probably on the road to become more geopolitical as well, because energy and politics is all interrelated, interlinked. So I don't think we want the game industry become one of the tools being used as a geopolitical. I don't think that's the case, right? So.
No, but I must say, I'm really happy that you had some recommendations for companies. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah.
Like concrete actions. Thank you.
And I also like the fact that you actually you still leave the freedom to have an eco mode or not. And if we join this to what Hugo developed into every game, then they can even sort of start seeing it and say, oh, perhaps I should try the eco mode more often. But I think it's really a good set of recommendations here. Thank you so much. I hope you also had fun in Berlin. And thank you for joining. And I think we are at the end of our session. Thank you so much, Berlin. Thank you, Malmö and Cologne as well. And above all, thank you and the two guys. It's only the women. Did you realize? Only the women have stuck around. It's because we have a women's drink afterwards. But thank you so much for being with us and for your inspiring comments and thoughts and the wonderful discussion we had earlier. Thank you so much. Thank you, and bye-bye. See you then next year, and keep your eyes peeled for next year's edition. As I said in the beginning, it's meant to be a community effort, so we are looking forward to somebody coming forth and saying, we want to do next year's edition. And kindly, the ICTA Climate SIG has given us space with an own channel on the Sustainability Nexus. So keep us posted and keep your eyes peeled for what's happening in the Nexus on the SIG Discord. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.